Hey guys, we clone back to my channel. What if Naruto was ultimate pervert of DxD with pervy Venelana, movie? Jiraiya had only one condition that had to be fulfilled if he were to seriously train Naruto. That condition was simply put, all about his student being honest about how he felt when he truly looked at a woman's body. That's how it all started, with Naruto admitting to his master that he did indeed like looking at a woman censored at her ass and thighs. Jiraiya naturally was so happy that he vowed right then and there that he would turn his precious apprentice into a masterpiece of a legacy. In the Sannin's head that meant that Naruto had to embrace the way of the super pervert. Naruto of course tried to resist. He really did try to resist, but Jiraiya's sheer stubbornness and Naruto's own traitorous hormones worked against him, and after being inside 30 different brothels and 42 strip clubs, Naruto finally caved in and became the second coming of Jiraiya. But the young Jinchuriki took his training a step further and became even more of a pervert than his godfather ever was. Now no longer was he just peeking at women and writing his own brand of the Icha Icha series. No, he touched women in lewd places, made them feel all hot and bothered while easily evading their rage-filled attacks and strikes. He'd be indecent some more and it would result in a blushing, stuttering mess of a woman running away with her pride and dignity in shambles while forever swearing to claim vengeance against him. That's how it usually worked for one Naruto Uzumaki. It was perfectly alright for him. It meant even more fun and teasing for when they came back just to have the process repeated all over again. The bonus was that he could watch their ass jiggle as they sprinted away from him, and boy was it almost always a good view. So used to his success and victories, one couldn't blame him too much for being pervy with the mother of the Sage of Six Paths. She was hot. Kaguya Otsutsuki was smoking hot. Sure, the horns were a bit freaky, and yeah, she was thousands of years old, but Naruto couldn't resist slapping her fat, thick ass. Those robes may have been quite loose when worn around her body, but there was no denying the dump truck ass that jutted out from behind even when wearing such a baggy clothing. As such, Naruto just had to smack her large rear end. He'd be spitting in his master's grave if decided not to. The wobbles made were very nice to look at even through her dress. The squeak that followed afterwards was also kinda cute in his opinion. Kaguya's reaction to being spanked was a mix of stunned shock, burning feminine fury, and a very noticeable pink blush all rolled into one single expression. But so confused she was as to how to feel in regards to him spanking her that in that same moment he and Sasuke took advantage and sealed her. Unfortunately, she snapped out of her trance and blasted him to a portal that sent him to the gap between dimensions. He only made it out thanks to the help of massive red dragon that was pretty nice and friendly. Said his name was Great Red. Strange name, but he wasn't judging. Now usually he'd worry about how to release the infinite Tsukuyomi, but Old Man Sage proved to really be a formidable ally and somehow managed to help him and Sasuke release everyone from their fake dreams even though he was in another dimension. Censored it that he couldn't bring him back to the elemental nation, but if he was to remain here, he better do what he always does best. Be a censoring maelstrom and cause chaos everywhere he goes. And the first place to be a victim to his awesomeness was this place right here. Kuo Academy, a high school he just enrolled into. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Now everyone, before I continue with today's lesson, I must first introduce you to a recently enrolled student. I trust you all to treat him well. The history teacher Hyakki-sensei said happily. Her tone may have been happy, but all the students gulped as she peered at them with eyes promising pain and detention if they acted against her wishes. You can come in, she cheerfully called out. What followed next was a torrent of crimson flooding the room as every woman had a nosebleed the moment the new student entered. The specimen was tall, being around 6'1" and possessing waist-length sun-kissed blonde hair tied into an elegant ponytail. He possessed electrifying blue eyes that rooted someone in their place. On either side of his face he had 3 whisker marks that gave him both a cute and hot look, all those features mashed well with a perfectly chiseled jawline that just screamed manly. Hyakki-sensei was no exception, as she too had a massive nosebleed when she got a good look at the new student's well-toned ass. She promptly passed out from the loss of blood volume missing from her body, a predicament that the female students in the class seemed to share as they too were unconscious. Leaving only Naruto and the unlucky male students in class who got doused and showered with the blood of their fellow students to remain. Naruto chuckled and just simply walked out of class, not exactly what he had in mind, but he wasn't complaining about the pride booster he just received. He stopped suddenly. The grin vanished from his face as he sensed something dangerous. Perverts. 3 of them to be exact. They were on the same exact level as his godfather in the pervy scale, and they had the potential to surpass even the Jinchuriki. He could not allow this to happen. Naruto turned and sprinted in the hallway to find his rivals. He eventually came up on them, and he felt his lips curl into a delicious and satisfactory grin as he saw them peeking on the woman inside the female locker room. He knew what he had to do. He quickly sneaked up on them and, without their notice, tied their shoelaces into one another. He quickly stepped back, and he had to suppress a chuckle for what came next. Transforming into his female alter ego, Naruko appeared, and she put her capable lungs to good use. Pervertsssssssss. Immediately the perverted trios reeled back in shock and fright, hearts thumping with adrenaline as their fight or flight response was activated and had them turning around and getting ready to desperately sprint away from the mob of angry, vengeful ladies wielding wooden swords. Thanks to Naruto tying their laces, they didn't make it far. Falling face first to the ground, the perverted trio looked even more pathetic than usual, and Naruto had to desperately bite his knuckles to suppress the bark of laughter that tried to force its way out. Ahem. One of the girls coughed. Issei, Matsuda and Motohama all turned and felt immense fear as they beheld their predicament, surrounded by at least 30 women with each one holding a shinai. Each lady looked at them with dead hollow eyes, unfortunately more than used to the antics of those 3. They ladies all advanced forward and showed no compassion or mercy as they beat the most perverted students the academy had to offer. Naruto winced and clutched his family jewels as he saw the average-looking one, the one with brown hair and who seemed to be the leader of the perverted trio, get struck in the balls multiple times. The screams that emanated from this hallway was heard by all of Kuo Academy. Akeno felt unusual today. Her senses were telling her to be on guard as she walked through the hallway of the school. It was the first time that she had felt this wary for quite some time, but from what she didn't know. She made it to the door that led to the stairs, and she walked up gracefully while continuing to contemplate the origin of this weird feeling. Unknown to her, everyone's favorite whiskered shinobi was right behind her, the creepy perv face out in full force as he admired her goddess-like body. Starting from her alluringly well-shaped calves leading to deliciously girthy and meaty thighs. Naruto enjoyed the view profoundly, loving the way her thick thighs shaked enticingly. If her thighs were this delicious, then surely her ass was even better and more legendary. That was Naruto's hypothesis. He looked further up and concluded that he was so very right. Akeno had a thick jiggling ass, 2 massive fat cheeks that just wobbled and demanded attention. To the average civilian blessed with this God-given view, they'd probably have thought that this raven-haired succubus wasn't wearing any underwear. Hell, even he for a second thought that this woman wasn't wearing panties, and he's a shinobi for crying out loud. But the more he stared, the more he had very brief glimpses of her underwear wedged in between her fat pale cheeks. Sadly, every adventure had its end, and the black-haired bombshell was no longer walking up the stairs. It didn't mean he couldn't have some fun though. Naruto felt his lips curl into a face-splitting grin. He quickly and silently made his way to the unaware fallen angel, devil hybrid, and pinched her ass hard. Ah! Akeno squealed painfully, turning around to slap and educate the fool who had the nerve and audacity to pinch her butt. She found no one, much to her confusion. She quickly turned back around and jumped back in fright from the human who was definitely not in front of her 2 seconds ago. Naruto grinned high. Akeno growled and let her fist fly. She held back enough to not permanently damage him, but she put enough strength in her punch to break his nose and make him bleed. Naruto dodged it, jumped back to put some distance between him and the lady, and said the first thing that came to mind. "Is that all you got, fat ass?" Akeno saw red. "What did you call me, you bastard?" She angrily walked up to him and tried to punch him again, this time letting out about 50% of her real power come out in her punch. No way was he going to dodge her fist this time. Sure, he would suffer tremendously, but she'll have him healed and his memory wiped out, not before stomping on his balls though. Naruto dodged it again and quickly maneuvered around her, much to her shock. Was he a fallen angel? A devil? Or something else? No way was this being a human with his reflexes. She had to control her temper even if she didn't like the idea. At the very least, it guaranteed that she no longer had to hold back if she chose to strike at him. "My name he exclaimed dramatically as Naruto Uzumaki, Lord of the Badasses and the Omega Pervert. Akeno snarled indignantly, I don't care who you are or the fact that you're a censoring pervert. You don't pinch my censoring ass and ridicule me by calling me fat ass. She stood up straighter and glared bloody murders at him. Perhaps she was unaware, but her movement did very amazing things to her mesmerizing large censors, Naruto noted perversely. Ah, but you should care because from here on out, I declare war on you. Naruto declared joyfully while extending his right arm towards. He uncurled his fist revealing a light blue fabric. Akeno dropped her glare and looked at the piece of material with a little confusion. It did seem a bit familiar to her. She looked at it closer and gasped as she realized exactly what it was. That was someone's panties, but why would he show it to H? She swiftly placed her hands on her bottoms, trying to feel for the undergarments that was stuffed between her butt. She deduced with growing dread and horror that she wasn't wearing her underwear anymore. He stole her underwear. Give that back, you pervert! Akeno screeched as she tried to retrieve the small material and failed due to the blonde demon's quick pulling back his arm. No, Naruto stuffed her undies in his pocket and grinned at her, admiring the large rosy blush gracing her entire face. I'm keeping it as my trophy. Proof that I utterly dominated you in our very first battle. That's it. I had enough out of you. Right before his very eyes, Akeno changed to her priestess garb and unleashed her largest and deadliest lightning spell at him. The surrounding area was promptly destroyed, and to her relief, Naruto Uzumaki was nowhere to be seen. She breathed heavily as she continued to peer at the destruction she just made. She hadn't exerted her power like that in quite some time. Already she could tell that both Rias and Sona will be undoubtedly mad at her, but at the very least that blonde buffoon was gone. But that did beg the question of who was he? Why exactly did he come after her? He was no doubt part of the supernatural world, but from which faction? And why was he toying around with her? Furthermore, was he Goy? That looks very painful. Akeno immediately turned around and lo and behold, that same blonde bastard stood before her, completely unharmed from her attack. She frowned. How what? He cheekily asked her. Akeno felt a vein budge on her forehead from the irritating man. How are you not hurt? Oh, that's simple. The Queen of Rias Gremory paid extremely close attention to what he had to say. I got out of the way. Akeno grit her teeth as she stared at him. Truly has she never met a more insufferable man in her entire life. Well, lady, I sadly got to leave, but know that from today onwards, I will forever torment your soul. Naruto declared resolutely. He walked away from the raven-haired bombshell, but not before pulling out her underwear to twirl them around his finger, merrily whistling as the distance between the two of them grew ever so larger. Naruto Uzumaki, she whispered dangerously, eyes filled with rage and feminine fury as she glared in his general direction. You made the biggest mistake of your life. End. Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Start. Naruto Uzumaki. Rias murmured his name curiously. Yes, that's his name. Akeno clenched her eyes shut as she remembered the previous day's event, the humiliation she felt at the hands of that new student. Once she gets her hands on him, he will suffer. Why is he a threat, Akeno-chan? Surely there is a reason as to why you seem to dislike him so much. Rias narrowed her eyes. Is he the reason you destroyed the wall in that hallway yesterday? She nodded glumly. The red-headed king continued to gaze at her queen, silently demanding answers. Akeno eventually relented. Yesterday I was walking to my next class when I felt someone pinch my butt painfully. Naturally I turned around to smack the fool who dared to do such a thing, but it was as though he disappeared. I turned back around and there he is. Rias's interest was heavily piqued as she listened to her best friend's story. I tried to punch him, but he dodged it and called me a fat ass. Rias immediately snorted and laughed at that, much to Akeno's displeasure. If you're done laughing, then may I continue? I'm so sorry, Akeno-chan, she said while letting out soft barks of laughter. It took her a few moments before she finally managed to rein in on her snickering. Please continue. Naturally I wasn't amused and I decided to throw another punch at him, but this time adding about 50% of my devil powers to boot. Akeno felt her king's disapproval and elaborated. I was going to heal him afterwards, but much to my astonishment he somehow manages to dodge that again, and that's when I was convinced that he wasn't human. The redhead sat up straighter as she paid close attention to the fallen angel, devil hybrid. Somehow in that same moment when he dodged Akeno trailed off slowly, a massive blush appearing on her face and arousing Rias's curiosity. He what? Rias inquisitively questioned. Akeno buried her heavily pink-tinted face in her hands, unable to look at her king no longer. He removed my panties and took them with him as a trophy. She mumbled softly, turning around to face the wall as though that would help lessen the embarrassment she felt in admitting this. He what? Rias exclaimed while standing up. Surely she heard wrong, because there was no way somebody just took her queen's underwear and casually walked away. Said queen moaned in dismay before repeating what she had just said. I'm going to go outside and breathe some air. Akeno-chan, for the rest of the day I want you to stay here, all right? The Gremory heiress voiced out emotionlessly as she made her way to the door leading out of the clubroom. Leaving one Akeno Himejima to curse the blonde's name as she knew precisely what her king was planning to do. Jiraiya's heir was having the time of his life. He usually found class and school to be an utter waste of time, but that was before he arrived here and sat in class 2B. The reason he was enjoying himself? It was simply really just the perverted trio being in his class and being a great comedy show to the watching blonde. They were talking about women as usual, and Naruto had to bite his lips to suppress his snickers as all the women including their teacher glared at the perverted trio as though they were the biggest scum in the world. Not that the ladies could be blamed too much considering what those three guys were talking about. He wasn't keeping track too much, but apparently it was a discussion between which female body part was the hottest, be it censored, ass or thighs. He personally was an ass man, but it didn't mean that he didn't like big censored or nice comfy thighs. Naruto nudged the girl to his right, a cute lady with dark blue streaks blending in with auburn-colored hair. She snapped out of her glaring and immediately bestowed him with a lovely smile, one that Naruto calmly returned much to her utmost delight. Hi, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. She flushed pink and Naruto inwardly smirked at the effect he was having on her. It's nice to meet you, Naruto-san. My name is Sierra Chung, she replied back shyly. My bad for bothering you, but can you tell me what's the deal with those three? He asked politely while gesturing towards the three most hated members of Kuo Academy. Instantaneously the shy yet delightful look faded away from Sierra's visage, her eyes grew wrathful, lips curving into a displeased frown. Suddenly the friendly-looking woman was gone and in her place was a demon who could kill men with her gaze alone. Her nose crinkled in distaste. You have to stay away from them, Naruto-kun. Those three are the perverted trio and they live up to their other titles, UGHHH. Other titles? He asked her curiously. She leaned in and whispered, first we have Motohama, he's the one with the glasses and he has the ability to calculate a woman's body measurement just by looking at them. Hence he's been bestowed the title of 3 sizes Scouter. His weakness is that his body becomes very weak once you remove his glasses. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He becomes weak when someone removes his glasses? How does that work? Nobody knows, but that's Motohama. Moving on, we have Matsuda, the bald-looking freak. Naruto winced at her description. He is worse than Matsuda in that he snaps pictures of women when the opportunity presents itself. His titles are Perverted Baldy and Censored Harassment Paparazzi. He used to be a former sports star back in junior high school, but he gave that all up because of his love for the woman's body. That made no sense. Didn't the fool realize that woman liked guys who were athletic? He's stupid. Naruto deadpanned. Sierra nodded wholeheartedly, fully agreeing with the blonde's statement. The last one and the worst of the three is Issei Hyodo. He's known as the perverted libido and is acknowledged by all as the leader of the perverted trio. He has this really disgusting ambition to one day have a harem and be the harem king. She scoffed. It is a unique dream and that's something I can respect. Regardless, thank you Sierra for your time. He gave her a small grin, causing a blush to creep on her cheeks. It's no problem, and Naruto-san, she responded shyly, losing all the confidence that came with hating on the perverted trio. Naruto turned towards the front of the desk while contemplating this new piece of information. That boy Issei wants to be the harem king, huh? He's definitely a lot more ambitious than I gave him credit for. Well, now he's suddenly become a lot more interesting him. Naruto grinned slightly as an idea popped up. Perhaps I should show him how it's done by being a good role model and training him. Now that sounded like a fabulous idea to the blonde. He'd essentially become just like his master by taking Issei on as his apprentice. That said, though, it shouldn't be anytime soon, as he needed to think through the training he'd devise for the boy. Not mentioning that he needed to publish his own version of Icha Icha in order to be seen as a legendary figure in Issei's eyes along with all the other perverts in the world. Just thinking about it made Naruto feel excitement. The bell rung and Naruto was snapped out of his thoughts as he got up quickly and left the class, much to the disappointment of the woman who wished to talk to him. They swiftly followed after him and were left confused as they could not find a trace of the blonde in the hallway. The sounds of shoes hitting the floor echoed through the desolate hallway. One Naruto Uzumaki was strolling around campus while the next sets of class had begun. He found himself unable to commit to his student schedule and as such, decided to simply explore and enjoy the view. The academy back in Konoha was nowhere near this impressive, and being a Sage Mode user, the Jinchuriki found this place to be quite relaxing and enjoyable. All he needed was to find a certain spot to laze around. Pretty much pull a Shikimaru and watch the glow. Naruto Uzumaki. Clouds. Naruto abruptly turned and was rewarded with the view of a red-headed goddess with huge sensors running towards him. His attention was snapped immediately towards her fat shapely jugs jiggling wildly in her shirt, and the shinobi barely held back a nosebleed at the view. What his master wouldn't give to see this. Coming to a stop before the blonde, the redhead looked as intimidating as a mouse to the shinobi as she poked him in the chest angrily while glaring at him with her aquamarine orbs. Who do you think you are to come to my territory, steal my best friend's underwear and continue going on as a student as though nothing happened? Ah well, that at least explained the anger, Naruto mused. He smiled charmingly at her. And what's your name, miss? Rias Gremory, and I demand you return what was stolen and explain your reasons for being in my territory. And why would I do that? I declared war on your friend, and that delicious panties of her is proof of my victory in battle. Rias was dumbfounded. You took her underwear because you won against her? He nodded. You see, Rias, I'm an Omega pervert, and that's the highest class of pervert there is in the world. When us Omega perverts emerge victorious against a woman in any sort of battle, it's tradition that we must take a woman's bra or panties as proof of our victory. It's a symbol of our might. And now, Naruto grinned. I declare war on you too, Rias Gremory, let us fight. She snarled. I'll give you a fight, and if I win then you will bow and apologize to both me and my friend. You will explain which faction you're from. You will also owe me a favor of any kind. The shinobi chuckled softly. And if I win then I get your panties, and you will also owe me a favor of any kind as well. Also I get to see you give me a 10-minute sensory dance while dressed in only a swimsuit outfit of your choosing. Rias immediately flushed a crimson red, her face matching the color of her hair in complexity and causing steam to blow from her ears. 10 minutes. Swimsuit outfit. Why yes, of course, an equal exchange if I don't say so myself. What's wrong? Scared? He taunted her. She reacted just as he expected. In your dreams, by the time I'm done with you you'll wish you were never born. Rias declared loudly. He grinned. We'll see about that. Come follow me. Immediately she swung her body around while slapping Naruto's face with her crimson locks. A little pink tinted his cheeks. Seemed that he was just like his father when it came to woman and red hair. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX prying eyes of the students who left class to watch the exchange between the blonde and redhead. Naruto would love to hear some of the rumors going on about him and Rias, but alas, you don't always get what you want. Mischievous Blue locked on frightening Ruby. Naruto smirked smugly. This fight should only take a minute maximum. I couldn't agree more. Rias retorted. Through some unknown signal, both combatants started with Naruto dashing towards Rias, who formed her signature power of destruction in her hand. She fired it at the blonde and smirked as he continued to dash towards it. She put just enough power to hurt him immensely while keeping him alive so he could fulfill his end of the bargain. Idiot, I just won, and in just a few seconds too. She watched as her bloodline power consumed the blonde and was startled to note that he emerged relatively unharmed. Impossible, he should be extremely hurt, thought a wide-eyed Rias as she watched the blonde come closer and closer towards her. Immediately she unfurled her wings and flew to the air to keep her distance, still in shock that he resisted her power and so easily even if it wasn't at full strength. He stopped and watched curiously as she hovered up there, finding her wings to be utterly fascinating. Not bad, Naruto Uzumaki. I underestimated you, but it doesn't matter because you'll still lose, she declared haughtily. She materialized her signature power of destruction once more. I'm just gonna call it POW. But this time powered it to her full capacity and fired it towards the still blonde. Naruto jumped away and smirked. Allow me to show you the difference between our abilities. He tried, he really did try, but he couldn't resist using one of those classic villain speeches. It was fun to use and it was badass. He brought his hand into the ram formation. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. What came next astounded Rias. 1,000 replicas of the blonde filled the clearing, each one smiling, grinning, and wearing some form of a condescending expression on their face. Rias was utterly shocked, lost for words and totally speechless. What manner of sorcery is this? She wondered amazedly. Never had she ever come across as an ability quite like this one. It seemed like the army of clones were well synchronized as they all jumped at once towards her. Rias screamed in shock as they reached her in the air, startled as she was and with who knows how many replicas were formed. Rias knew she was done for. Even if she could form her POW in time, it still wouldn't be enough for the army of clones before her. I give up, she yelled desperately, and the large groups of Narutos just grinned before dissipating all at once, leaving only her and the original Naruto. She flew down a bit shakily, her heart pulsating with quite a bit of fear as Naruto slowly made his way before her. He stood before her and smiled lightly. I believe I've just won, Rias, he teased her lightly. What are you? She cursed herself for stuttering. I'm just human really, well not your average type of human but yeah. Rias was awestruck. You're human? With that kind of power? I'm pretty awesome I know. He chuckled. But enough about that. I believe you owe me something right now, he said while extending his palm to her. Rias was confused for a moment before she remembered the terms of their deal. She flushed pink but didn't make a fuss about it. She started with placing her hands on her thighs, moving them up to grasp the waistband of her underwear while bunching up her skirt slightly and drawing her small fabric down. She bent over as she tugged them towards her knees. Her large sensors wobbling enticingly, much to Naruto's delight. She finally finished removing them and handed them to the blonde without muttering a word. Naruto stretched her undergarments before her very eyes, testing out the stretchability of the material much to her embarrassment. He nodded approvingly and stuffed her panties in his censored pocket. Why do you take woman's underwear? Surely you must be joking about the defeating the woman and taking it as a prize tradition, she questioned. Naruto snickered. Maybe I was joking or perhaps it was the truth, but it should no longer matter to you, Rias. What does matter is when I have you dance for me while wearing a swimsuit, and don't forget that you owe me a favor as well. Rias groaned. Now be careful my dear, don't walk up the stairs or anything like that unless you're okay with flashing someone with a view. He teased her. She stared at him blankly before turning around and walking away. Having had her fill of the blonde demon for an entire century. No millennia. Ha 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 ha. Azazel exploded with laughter as Naruto regaled him with another story of Jiraiya's inspiring life. Ha ha s, so you're ha 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 t telling me that your master became stronger pfftt when he peeked on woman in the hot springs. Naruto nodded with a cheesy grin and Azazel felt the moisture build in his eyes from how hard he'd been laughing. That's Jiraiya-sensei, my master was one hell of a man. Wish I could have met him. You and him would get along mighty fine if I do say so myself. Naruto threw the hook of the fishing bait in the sea, waiting patiently to catch an unfortunate fish and reel it in. So what's the deal with you in this world, old man? Give me the details. Where to start? Azazel scratched his goatee as he pondered about what information he should reveal. Well, I suppose the beginning is a good place. This world, Naruto-kun, is composed of many different factions and pantheons, the most dominant and well-known group being the biblical pantheon composed of angels, fallen angels, and devils. Naruto quirked his eyebrow in curiosity. What's the difference between angels and fallen angels, old man? Shush, I was getting to that. Youngsters these days, no respect for their elders. The dual-haired man complained. The shinobi stuck out his tongue childishly. Fallen angels are basically angels who fell out of heaven because of committing a sin or feeling a certain way too much, like let's say suppose, lust. Feel too much lust and you fall, that's what happened to me. So basically, you became a fallen angel because you thought about censored and asked too much. Azazel nodded. Pretty much, but let's not drift off topic. The simple version of it is that the three different factions, angels, fallen angels and devils have been at a three-way war for many centuries. It ended like 200 years ago or something, but that was because each faction suffered too many losses and casualties to continue. There has been no actual battle since the ceasefire, but skirmishes do happen occasionally that we clean up in order to avoid going to war again," Azazel added. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Kind of like the Elemental Nation before we banded together because of the Akatsuki. And the other factions or pantheons? What are their stance on you guys or in general? Azazel stroked his goatee. The other factions just mostly keep to themselves. They're not adverse to peace, but neither are they adverse to war. In general, the relations between us are cordial yet tense, not friends, not enemies. Out of curiosity, how would you describe some of them? The leader of the vampires, Akasha Bloodriver is the name. She's quite powerful and she can be ruthless, but I do know that she doesn't want her race to war against other races or to hurt humankind. The vampires in general, though, are a lively bunch, and I say that quite sarcastically. There's the Greek pantheon. They're an interesting bunch as well. The leader of the pantheon is Zeus. However, the most powerful from that group is Hades, the god of the underworld. He's not very fond of the ceasefire in place. Azazel's sweat dropped at his own statement. The shinobi contemplated the information silently and gestured for the fallen angel to continue. You have the yokai, whom are among the most peaceful of the supernatural world. You'll find that yokais live alongside humans in the city of Kyoto. They're not the most powerful faction out there, but they do have the protection of the Shinto gods. That's not mentioning that Yasaka, the leader of the yokai, is quite powerful in her own rights. Azazel shrugged. Each faction had their own goals, but most in general are not into killing one another or into seeing the Great War happen again. Naruto narrowed his eyes. And what do you want? Peace. I've seen too much bloodshed and misery. All I want is for us all to get along and to have fun with different women from different factions. Be they yokai, valkyries, magicians, or even dragon women. The leader of the fallen angel drooled as he thought of the possibilities with peace. The shinobi snorted and laughed. Well then, consider us good allies starting today. Let us achieve world peace by working together. He extended his hand and Azazel grinned and shook it, deeply pleased with the new alliance. So any thoughts on how you want to do this? Azazel asked his younger companion curiously. Naruto's eyes twinkled mischievously. How do you feel about giving me a trip to the yokai faction? Kyoto was an especially delightful and vibrant city. Even outside the nation of Japan, it was known far and wide for its superb culture, its nature and forests, the peace and the relaxing atmosphere, and that was without mentioning that the city was just awe-strikingly beautiful. If one were looking for heaven on earth, they'd find it here in Kyoto. Naruto normally didn't pay attention to the way a city looked or at the scenery, but even he was easily impressed with just how beautiful the city of Kyoto was. But even that was not Kyoto's most admirable trait. No, that honor belonged to the supernatural living in peace with the humans. Naruto senses a genjutsu that covered the yokai features from human eyes, rather understandable, but the fact that the yokai didn't despise the humans and lived amongst them was very respectable in the blonde's perspective. I'm gonna like it here. What do you think about all this, Kurama? The only thing that really catches my interest is in seeing if there are any fox girls. Well, that and asserting dominance over this world. If you fight any massive monster or beast, I want you to let me fight. No problem. Naruto walked around, cheerfully waving at the startled supernatural beings just looking at him warily. The shinobi paid no heed to the growing number of yokai following him, instead opting to whistle merrily and go about his way. A sudden thought invaded Naruto's head and the blonde bolted, inwardly laughing at the shock and rage that he sensed in more than 24 yokai from having to chase after him. The beings chasing after him weren't too shabby, but the shinobi was a master of stealth, even at a young age. There was a reason why the blonde could paint the Hokage monument in broad daylight unnoticed, just as there was a reason as to how the blonde could escape the clutches of several Anbu squads. His stealth at that age was unparalleled, and he only improved since then. It took less than a minute to completely lose them, and Naruto felt partially bad for all the negative feelings that the yokai harbored within themselves. Well, thanks to me, they now have the drive to improve. Feeling himself in a completely mischievous mood, the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails flared his chakra for all of Kyoto to feel and promptly ran away, keeping enough distance so as to hide and witness the consequence of his actions. He wasn't disappointed, as within moments the area was populated with hundreds of Ukai warriors, but none of them caught Naruto's attention as his gaze centered and focused on what was undoubtedly one of the most beautiful women he'd ever seen in his entire life. There was a high probability that she was number one on that list, he mused, awestruck. A long waterfall of voluminous blonde hair a shade lighter than his was tied into an elegant ponytail that cascaded all the way down to her beautifully sculpted calves. Eyes drifting upwards and easily noticing how her legs seemed to stretch on for miles, he sadly could not gauge how thick her thighs were with them being covered by her shrine maiden outfit. But he could easily see the 9 yellow fox tails that wiggled and danced in the air behind her, a curious sight to the blonde that helped draw his attention to her insanely wide hips narrowed into a dainty waist that then led up to ridiculously enormous sensords, the biggest he'd ever seen in his 17 years of life. And that was including Tsunade in the list. The shinobi continued admiring the woman's massive shapely sensords, the skin and texture, the perkiness and its sheer size. Naruto could scarcely remember seeing sensords this beautiful. The Jinchuriki quickly clutched his nose as blood started spewing due to the blonde woman's milk jugs jiggled erratically, courtesy of said woman stomping her foot on the ground furiously and yelling at one of the guards near her. She was too far away for Naruto to hear her without using chakra to enhance his senses. Not that he cared about what was said, he already knew that it was about him. In order to prevent further blood loss, Naruto was forced to avert his gaze from her censored, and he gasped as his eyes landed on the woman's breathtaking features. Her lips, soft and temptingly plump, were a cherry blossom pink that was framed between delicate cheekbones. Right above lay a cute button nose that twitched ever so slightly. Her smooth skin was pale and it accentuated the glow of her molten gold orbs found underneath short and round eyebrows. It was official, the Ukai leader was gorgeous. Her visage was worthy of worship. No, it was created to worship. The longer Naruto gazed at the goddess of a woman, the more he felt like a 7-year-old about to ask his first crush to play. Okay, enough. You are Naruto censoring Uzumaki. You don't crush on women, they crush on you. Get your shit together and be the badass that you know you are. Glad you finally stopped embarrassing yourself, Kit. You looked unbefitting of being my Jinchuriki with the way you drooled. Kurama deadpanned at his container, secretly amused by his thoughts and his reaction to the 9-tailed fox woman. Although it was given that he'd react that way because she is a Kyuubi, the strongest Biju smirked pridefully. What do you mean drooling? I didn't drool, you giant furry bastard. Naruto glared furiously at the 9-tails fox demon. What did you call me, you dumb brat? You heard me. Or is it that age is finally catching up on you? How old are you again? The Kyuubi bared his teeth menacingly at his tenant. Silence. Naruto looked at the beast with a stupefied expression, hair very much out of place due to the loud bellow that ruffled his clothes and appearance. Note to self, never bring up his age, sensitive topic. I'll talk to you later, you annoying fox. Naruto waved at his friend. Kurama grunted, trying to force away the smile that permeated his face. Paying attention once more to the real world, Naruto was promptly disappointed to find that the vision of beauty he gaped at earlier was gone along with most of the guards and fighters. Only a squadron remained and the shinobi swiftly ignored them. He needed to find her again. Staying still and breathing evenly, Naruto felt peace and calm wash over him as the essence of nature became one with his very being, the orange pigmentation proof that he entered the legendary Sage Mode state. The blonde couldn't rely on his emotion-sensing abilities to determine where she was. There was simply too much frustration and anger along with a barrage of other feelings that clouded his senses. But with Sage Mode, he could easily pinpoint the exact location of the female Kyuubi. Naruto was completely unaware that the way his chakra and very being weaved in complete harmony with the essence of nature caught the attention of several high-profile supernatural beings across the world, including the leader of the Ukai herself. None could determine his exact location, but they could tell it was somewhere in Kyoto. The unintentional show of strength signaled to the high-profile supernatural beings that a new player has entered the world. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX residence as Yusaka strolled to her office. Mind set ablaze with thoughts and theories of the being who dared to come to her home and challenge her the way he did. She was furious by the act of disrespect, made even more insulting due to the offender hiding away and masking their presence after he or she deliberately invited all of Kyoto to know their location. The stunt was basically the middle finger to her and all the yokai living in Kyoto. Yet that wasn't the worst of it. The longer the offender stayed here in Kyoto, the more she worried over what it could mean for her daughter Kuno. Her maternal instincts demanded that she flay alive the one who could potentially harm her daughter, yet as time dragged on and squadrons of yokai reported not finding anything or anyone suspicious, the more she became increasingly agitated, forcing her to avoid her precious daughter lest she wrong her when Kuno did nothing to be punished for. Despite the frustration and anger swirling deep inside her, Yasaka made sure to mask any sort of emotions and continued to amble gracefully with all the class expected of a leader and high priestess. Though one would argue that the way the female Kyuubi walked surpassed any sort of refinement and elegance that'd be displayed by important leader around the supernatural world. Her long, model-like legs seemed to cross over each other with her stride, one foot in front of the other, eating up the distance between her and her destination with a gait that would have instantly charmed anyone assuming they weren't already bewitched by her divinely seductive appearance. Within a minute Yasaka entered her study, eyes instantly narrowing on the blonde human sitting on her chair in her home. Wait. Naruto dived away from the scorching fireball that incinerated the spot he was previously in, ducking quickly under her punch and grabbing a hold of her arm, flinging her away from him. I have not come to cause you or anyone any sort of harm. Then why have you come here, in my home? She snarled angrily, muscles coiled with tension and adrenaline as she glared heatedly at who was most definitely the one responsible for today's events and shenanigans. Because I wished to talk to you privately. Naruto forced his gaze on his fellow blonde's eyes, using every ounce of willpower within him to prevent his attention from drifting downward. Yasaka bared her teeth. That stunt of your earlier today was anything but private. Naruto chuckled and sheepishly scratched the back of his head under her withering glare. I did that because such a method would help me determine who the leader was while also showcasing that I mean serious business. I hope you forgive me. And why do you wish to talk to me? Furthermore, who are you to seek an audience with me so brazenly? The Shinto priestess crossed her arms and gave her fellow blonde her undivided attention. The shinobi grinned. I am the legendary sage of Mount Myoboku, the warrior who faced and defeated a god. I am Lord Naruto Uzumaki. Yasaka blinked and deadpanned, sighing quietly when she realized that the man before her was one of those eccentric types. Censored KKK. I forgot to call myself the Omega Pervert in the introduction. Naruto internally raged at his blunder. He had one chance at a good first impression. One chance. The Shinto priestess exhaled a breath. Kuno, young lady, how many times did I tell you to not eavesdrop when I have company? Her declaration awarded her with the sound of shuffling feet before the door was slid open. I'm sorry, Ka-sama. I was just curious and you sounded angry and Kuno stammered nervously as she was on the receiving end of the older Kyuubi glare. I'm sorry, but I grew worried about you. Yasaka felt her eyes soften as she walked up to her daughter, drawing her in for a warm hug while keeping an eye on her guest. I forgive you, sweetie, but I need you to go. I must have a private discussion with Naruto-san. Okay? Kuno nodded her head and left the hug slowly, looking unsurely at her mother before she decided to ultimately trust her and step out. Turning her full attention to the extremely powerful human, Yasaka considered him and his motives. Here was a man with chakra that far surpassed even hers. He sneaked into her compound undetected, made fools of the sensory unit within Kyoto, and her instincts told her that all that was just the tip of the iceberg. It pained her pride to admit, but had he actually decided to attack her, she heavily doubted that she'd even be alive right now. She needed to be smart with her approach. Making an enemy out of someone this powerful was not a wise decision, especially when she didn't even consider that the man before her could go into senjutsu. Yasaka shuddered to think of how strong he'd be with sage arts added to the mix. That was all without mentioning that perhaps he was genuine in his statement of not wanting to cause any sort of harm. No matter which way she looked at it, the smart thing to do was to hear him out. Naruto-san, I know somewhere where we can talk privately away from any ears or prying eyes. Naruto smiled cheerfully. Lead the way, Yasaka-chan. Yasaka sighed. He was very much indeed one of those eccentric types. End Chapter 3. Chapter 4 Start. Naruto whistled a merrily tune as he walked alongside the ridiculously hot Fox MILF. A fat grin plastered on his visage as he could sense the indignation and frustration rolling off her, no doubt due to how lightly he was taking her and not considering the female Kyuubi to be a threat. A full minute passed before Yasaka snapped her head towards the younger blonde, irritation clear in her eyes as she glared at him. "Can you stop whistling?" The shinobi played dumb. But why? Is it annoying you?" The fox woman gritted her teeth and had to forcefully remember her situation lest she aggravate the warrior before her who could most assuredly wipe out all of Kyoto. "Be calm, Yasaka, be calm." Managing to rein in her emotions after a few seconds, Yasaka mustered all the grace and class she could gather and replied politely. "Yes, Naruto-san, I'm afraid it does grate on my nerves a little bit." Naruto smiled. "Well then I'll stop." Yasaka felt relief at his statement, but only if you call me Naruto-kun, or if you really want to, then I suppose Naruto-sama is also alright. It was only due to the numerous years of having to deal with many vexing, and more often than not individuals so pestiferous that she wanted to rip her hair out of frustration that had Yasaka be able to suppress the groan that almost made itself known to the powerful human. "Very well, Naruto-sama." The Jinchuriki internally pouted. He was rather hoping that she would call him with the other prefix. "Oh well, you don't always get what you want." Roughly 5 minutes had passed until the unusual duo made it to a serene clearing with a bridge built on top of a spacious and beautiful-looking pond. Now free from prying eyes and ears, Yasaka shifted her attention to the powerful human, curiosity, intrigue and suspicion all rolling into one haze as she gazed at him with the authority and stance befitting the ruler of the yokai faction. "So for what reasons have you sought me in the comforts of my own home?" "Well," the shinobi drawled out mischievously, "I wanted to see how you would look dressed in your house clothing." He looked her over from top to bottom appreciatively, just barely suppressing a whistle as he admired the curvy fox priestess before him. "And I am happy that I did so." The normal elegant garb that the female Kyuubi wore every day was meant to be modest and unflattering to the eye. It looked graceful, but when donned by a regular woman, it just simply failed to convey just how beautiful their form really was. That was how it was meant to be. It was the outfit of a priestess. It looked good, but it would completely conceal a woman's assets from lewd eyes. That was the idea anyway, but when donned by a completely stacked and insanely curvy woman like Yasaka, it simply just could not accomplish its purpose. Naruto had seen many similar outfits back in the Elemental Nation and he knew perfectly well what their function was for. It was for that reason that when he saw the blonde MILF fill out the loose robes so beautifully that he desperately wanted to see her garbed in something less modest. And seeing her now, he truly believed with every fiber of his being that the woman in front of him was the most gorgeous being to have ever existed in all the dimensions. Attired in nothing but a low-cut black tank top that exposed a massive amount of cleavage and a tiny pair of gray shorts that left the lower ends of her ass exposed, Yasaka looked absolutely bewitching as she stood before the shinobi, looking very much like the definition of sensuality. The shinobi was almost dazed by her beauty. Naruto briefly wondered just how exactly did Yasaka manage to stuff her assets into her dress. The tank top she was wearing looked like it would tear right from the middle with just how much it stretched in order to contain her huge creamy sensors. He theorized that either the tank top would burst from containing ridiculously large jugs, or Yasaka's fat shapely sensor would spill over the fabric. It was one or the other. The high priestess blushed in embarrassment as his words registered in her head before a look of anger overcame her features. "Pervert." The shinobi chuckled and jumped back from the enraged woman before she would decide that she wanted to pummel him. "I'm not the one dressed indecently, Yasaka-chan," he teased. The leader of the yokai snarled and replied distastefully, "That's because I was within the comforts of my own home, a place where I can dress and do as I like, or so I thought anyway." Naruto cringed and gave her a genuine apologetic look. "I'm sorry, Yasaka-chan, I won't do it again." The shinobi understood full well just how upsetting it would be to not have a place to unwind to after a difficult day. At his apology, Yasaka took a few seconds to visibly calm down before she quietly sighed. "It wouldn't do well to let her temper run amok. You have been forgiven, Naruto-sama, but please tell me what exactly did you wish to discuss with me?" All traces of mischief faded from the blonde's eyes as he gazed at her seriously. "Peace." At her confused look he elaborated. "What I want is for this world to live in peace and harmony." The high priestess grew surprised at his answer. His goal was certainly much more noble than she had thought it would be, but it did make her wonder how he planned on going about grasping peace and what role she played in. "And why come to me?" What exactly can I do to help you achieve world peace? Two things really. The first is your help in reaching other important figures from other pantheons and factions, and the second, Yasaka braced herself for the answer. Your friendship. The female Kyuubi looked at the shinobi incredulously. My friendship? How would that help? And you still haven't answered my first question? Easy there, Haim-chan. Give me time to answer the questions. Naruto smirked mischievously. The priestess rolled her eyes and gestured for the Jinchuriki to continue. I came to you because from my understanding only the Yukais live together alongside humans, something that hardly any other factions deign to do, as I can imagine just what they think of us. As for why I want your friendship, that's easy. When you have friends and family there to help you with your goals, achieving said goals is a lot easier and it means much more too. Naruto answered truthfully. Yasaka gazed at Human with surprise. Mouth slightly parted with surprise as she beheld the figure before her now with a lot more respect than she had given him since the start. I see. Whether it was intentional or not, Naruto's words had the high priestess look at him in a new light, finding his presences and intentions to be much more genuine and respectable. Her position as the leader of yokai faction naturally always compelled her to gaze at everyone with suspicion. She didn't like doing so, but it was a necessary duty in order to both safeguard the city of Kyoto and most importantly protect her precious daughter. Yet standing just a mere 2 meters away from the Human with reserves resembling an ocean of chakra that was so bright and warm, coupled with his intentions and the gentle look that now permeated his eyes, Yasaka found herself starting to trust the Human despite her instincts as a yokai leader warning her not to. She briefly wondered how exactly did he even possess chakra. It shouldn't have been possible, and yet it was. Not mentioning the massive amount of it that he possessed. Yasaka closed her eyes for a brief moment before she opened them once more to regard the shinobi who moments earlier had almost rendered her speechless. Then I believe that we have much to discuss in regards to both the alliance and a possible friendship. Naruto nodded. I like the Sue. Before he could finish his sentence he was interrupted by the sound of his stomach growling. The shinobi felt heat creep up to his cheeks as the beautiful fox MILF smiled amusingly. Perhaps a more appropriate time to converse would be to do so after we've eaten and had a good night's rest. If you would, follow me, Naruto-sama. Turning swiftly, Yasaka headed back from the direction in which they came from, expecting her new potential ally to follow and walk alongside her without question. Naruto quickly grasped his nose to stop the nosebleed that almost erupted at the sight of Yasaka's absurdly massive ass jiggling in those flimsy shorts as she swayed her way back to her residence, the sheer size of her pale rump absolutely shocking and mesmerizing the blonde shinobi. Never had he seen an ass so ridiculously huge as the one before him. From the moment he set eyes on her, he knew that the priestess possessed a fine rear end, but he wasn't expecting it to be so perfect and dizzying. Naruto enjoyed his new profound discovery as his eyes zeroed in on the wobbling flesh peeking out from underneath her gray shorts. So lost was he in admiring the woman's beautifully sculpted features, he almost didn't hear her voice. Enjoying the view? Yasaka asked teasingly, perfectly aware of the young man's ogling. Of course. Naruto replied, gracing her with a large smile even when she could not see it. In response to the Jinchuriki's answer, Yasaka exaggerated the sway of her wide fertile hips, barely biting back a laugh when she tossed a brief glance over her shoulder and caught the wide-eyed astonished look that flickered across his face. The way he's reacting to my body, she thought while smirking smugly, is quite promising. I do believe I have much to benefit from an alliance with this powerful Human. While not manipulative in nature, Yasaka saw herself as a businesswoman who simply wished for her home to thrive and have great stability. It was all she wanted, a stable and bright future for her daughter and her city. More often than not she had to wonder what would happen if for some reason one of the factions would decide to attack. What then? Yasaka had pride in her people, but by no means was she arrogant. As much as it pained her to do so, she had to admit that the yokai faction was not very powerful when compared to one of the great three or the other major powers. Sure, they had the protection of the Shinto gods, but what if they were too late in coming to protect the yokai from any would-be invaders? Or what if they decided not to interfere and to leave the yokai to their fate? Yasaka was no stranger to the fickle interests of the gods. May she be forgiven for doubting them, but she couldn't just entirely have faith in the deities. She needed more assurance that someone could protect them from danger if it ever came to their doorstep. The prospect of her homes in ruins, her people killed or tortured, and worst yet something happening to Kuno. Nothing terrified her more than the possibility of something horrible happening to her daughter. She needed more power in order to secure the future for Kuno and the city of Kyoto, power that this human possessed in abundance. She wasn't sure just how powerful he really was, but what she could determine was that he outclassed her by quite a margin without the use of senjutsu. An impressive feat for one so young. Yasaka felt her admiration for the young man swell. An alliance with him would bode really well. But it did make her wonder, if he was stronger than her by quite a bit without senjutsu, then just how strong was he with it? And what other tricks did he have in his sleeve? That was an answer she was looking forward to quite eagerly. While immensely enjoying the view, Naruto couldn't help but wonder just what exactly was wrong with this woman. Was she not the very same one who called him a pervert and screamed the word at the top of her lungs? To transition so suddenly from a woman who disliked a man for admiring her assets, to then shaking her hips and being so teasing and coy about it. Naruto couldn't be blamed for being stumped by the unforeseen change. But despite his confusion, he did know one thing. He was Naruto censoring Uzumaki. He wasn't going to let her mess with him any longer. Dadbeo. Smack. Yasaka jumped in place, squealing at the pain that erupted on her nervous system due to the impact of Naruto slapping her rear end with the force of a whip. The shinobi quickly sped past her, stopping for a quick moment to toss the high priestess with a cheeky grin. Last one back is a rotten egg. With his piece now said, Naruto sprinted back to the residence and left the unamused female Kyuubi to glare dully at where he previously stood. Yasaka sighed at the childishness before she decided to examine the shinobi's work on her body, gently tugging the left side of her gray short over her fat cheeks, unintentionally lifting one half of her massive ass with her ministration. Quite a few wiggles later and Yasaka watched with satisfaction as her left ass cheek slipped out from the confinement of her shorts and bounced hypnotizingly. And there it is, the blonde MILF rolled her eyes once she got a good look at the red handprint that was now painted on the center of the usually pale flesh of her bottom. HMPH. Men. You smell like a fox. Kuno pointed out as she scrunched her nose curiously. Kuno, young lady. How many times did I tell you that we don't sniff people like that? Yasaka admonished, a large blush erupting on her visage as she heard the shinobi laugh wholeheartedly. Naruto grinned. You smell like a fox too. Many hours had passed since last night's events. The shinobi since then was treated to a warm hearty meal prepped kindly by the woman whose house he initially sneaked into. She was even kind enough to offer him a place to stay at one of the inns in Kyoto. That was an offer he would have loved but had to unfortunately turn down. He didn't want to impose on her generosity even if she insisted otherwise. Sleeping on the bark of a tree wasn't exactly comfortable, but he did it enough times to be able to sleep on it without much fuss. It was only around 10 o'clock that he decided to go visit the high priestess, and that's how he found himself in the kitchen having a cup of tea with Yasaka when Kuno came barging in and started sniffing him, much to her mother's mortification. Kuno would have giggled at the silly statement had her mother not been glaring at her so scarily. She ducked her head and bowed in hopes that it would appease her. Sorry, Okawa-sama. Yasaka sighed before she cupped her daughter's face and leant in for a quick smooch to her forehead. It's all right, sweetie, but can you give mommy some private time with her guest? We're having a bit of an important discussion right now. The younger Kyuubi nodded before she left the kitchen, not before hugging the older woman and waving goodbye to her mother's guest. So, before we got interrupted, I believe you were going to tell me how you have chakra, Naruto-sama. Yasaka reminded him. Naruto moaned in delight as the taste of green herb tea danced on his taste buds. He set the cup down on the table and closed his eyes in bliss. Oh, well, to put it simply, I'm from a different dimension, he said casually. The high priestess blinked in surprise. Pardon me? Did you say a different dimension? Naruto bobbed his head in agreement. Yup, in my world everyone has chakra, though unlike here, there are only humans in that world, no devils or yokai or something. Yasaka looked at her fellow blonde disbelievingly. Another world? Was he actually serious, or was he pulling her many tales? Naruto-sama, I'm afraid I can't tell if you're joking or telling the truth. The shinobi opened his eyes to gaze at her and sent her a small grin. I'm telling the truth, Yasaka-chan, though I can certainly understand why you're so doubtful. The female Kyuubi took a few moments to think of how she could word her next sentence without offending her guest. Assuming you were telling the truth and you haven't given me any reason to doubt you, how exactly did you come here? You remember how I told you yesterday that I faced a god and won? Well, that very same god, goddess actually to be more accurate, decided to blast me away to a different portal just to spite me before she was sealed away. Naruto explained normally, looking for all intents and purposes as though he was talking about planting seeds in a garden. Yasaka stayed quiet, unable to form a response as his words rang repeatedly in her head. A human faced a goddess and won. While admittedly quite powerful, she just couldn't see him winning against a divine being unless he used the senjutsu she sensed yesterday. And even then she wasn't so sure of the odds being in his favor. Not mentioning that if he really was telling the truth, said goddess had to be extremely powerful in order to possess a dimension warping ability. She just couldn't say I think this will help my case. Naruto got up and synchronized his energy with Kurama's and the natural energy of the world. At once his form glowed and dripped with sheer potent power, 9 black sizable orbs floating behind his back while his hair stood up with 2 particular bangs pointing upwards and looking like he had horns. All around the supernatural world, the greatest of censors along with beings of immense strength froze as they sensed the presence of a new player with unimaginable might, his energy output and power easily surpassing their own and rivaling that of Great Red and Ophis. Great Red grinned as he longed to fight someone other than that troublesome brat Ophis, while said brat grew excited at the possibility of someone strong aligning with her to fight the true dragon. The strongest that the supernatural world had to offer have finally realized that one Naruto Uzumaki was here in their dimension. Though none were more aware of that than Yasaka as she studied the shinobi's majestic form with astonishment and reverence. There were many other changes to note off. The color of his skin now glowing brightly as though he was the sun given human form, the shape of his pupils becoming twin slits with one horizontal and one vertical, giving it a biblical cross-like look. The whisker marks that adorned either side of his cheeks were promptly replaced by 3 thick horizontal black rectangles. But of course the biggest change that Yasaka immediately noticed was his power. If his reserves before the transformation, which was already so massive to begin with, was the size of a lake, now it resembled all the oceans in the world. The sheer quantity of it was so vast. With that sort of power at his disposal, he could easily wipe out the entire Shinto pantheon, she thought in stupefied awe. And the feel of his chakra, Yasaka purred impulsively. She froze, instantly comprehending the sound she just made and how undignified she just presented herself as. Naruto blinked before he looked at her amusingly. Yasaka-chan, did you just purr? The female Kyuubi felt heat envelop the entirety of her face as she stuttered no, of course not. That was just a. She tried to think of something before she ended up sighing in defeat. Yes, it was a purr. Nothing wrong with that, to be honest. The Jinchuriki scratched the side of his cheek offhandedly. It was pretty cute, but putting that all to the side, this form right here is what I used to defeat said goddess before she blasted me away, though I do have to confess that I did have help. Kaguya-chan was too powerful for just me alone. Yasaka stood up and closed the distance between her and her guest, looking over him from head to toe as she examined him with utmost curiosity. She heavily suppressed the urge to purr and lean into his chest as everything about him pulled at her soul and demanded that she surrender herself into his warm, comforting embrace. The 9 black spheres floating behind him were a touch curious. Instinctively she reached out to grasp one of them, not knowing the danger and damage a truth-seeking orb can do to a person. Naruto swiftly grasped her hand. Sorry Yasaka-chan, but touching one of those orbs is very dangerous. The moment he grasped her hand, Yasaka lost all manners of her concentration and focus, burying her face into the shinobi's chest and purring loudly and uncontrollably, 9 fox tails swaying recklessly behind her and giving away just how happy she was to be hugging the current object of her affection. I thought only cats purred. Still, I am not complaining about this. The reincarnation of Ashura hugged her back. One hand clutched at her waist while the other stroked and caressed her long beautiful hair. Based on how she was reacting to his petting, namely her pushing her head into his hand, she must have really liked him playing with her hair. Okawa-sama. Yasaka regained control of herself as she heard Kunu's voice, dialing back a few steps from the shinobi's embrace as her daughter's voice made itself known right outside the kitchen door. Can you help me with homework when you're free? The shinobi quickly returned back to base form, no longer seeing the need to be in his six-path state. Yasaka felt her visage submerge in heat once more as she remembered with great clarity of the moment she just shared with her guest. Still, despite her embarrassment, she didn't forget to reply back to her daughter. Of course, sweetie, anything for you. Thank you, Okawa-sama. Kuno excitedly thanked, "No problem." Using her enhanced senses, the yokai leader waited until she determined that her daughter was not around before she focused back once more at her fellow blonde. "My apologies, Naruto-sama, for acting so brazenly." Naruto grinned. "No need to apologize, I enjoyed the hug and wouldn't mind another one." The blonde MILF giggled briefly and nodded her head. "Coming back to our discussion before I got sidetracked, so you really are from another world," she stated factually. "That's right, from my understanding I have no way back, I'm pretty much stranded here in this dimension until I meet someone who like Kagaya possesses the ability to teleport through worlds." Yasaka looked at him curiously. "How long have you been here, Naruto-sama?" Naruto shrugged. "A few days now. And you already wish to bring peace in this world despite only living here for less than a week?" The shinobi nodded. "Nothing matters to me more than everyone living together in harmony." And he really did mean it, more than becoming the Hokage, more than possessing the underwear of the finest women in the land. To him the most important goal to strive for was peace. Though speaking of underwear, Naruto briefly wondered what kind the blonde beauty wore. When it came to stealing panties, there was only 2 rules that he always abided by. Rule number 1 being that the owner of the panties had to be at least 18 years of age. In this FIC, Rias and Akeno are 18 turning 19 soon. The other being that say the woman was a major leader like the Mizukage or even Yasaka, he wasn't allowed to steal their underwear as he did need their cooperation in order to foster peace through the world. It was for that reason alone that he hadn't attempted to steal the blonde MILF's undergarments. Though I see no harm in asking for her underwear as a souvenir. In that brief moment of thought, Naruto missed the admiration that tinted Yasaka's hazel pools as she fully appreciated the peace-driven man before her. He could be the key to ensuring the protection and survival of the yokai race. He was extremely powerful and his goals were noble and just. The first quality alone meant that if he were tied to the yokai faction, people from all over the supernatural would be quite wary to cause them any sort of trouble. Hell, if he had been here a few years prior to the Nekosho extinction incident and he was allied to the yokai, the devils would have cowered in fright and would have thought twice before almost killing off a whole race. The power she sensed from him when he was briefly in that uniquely looking form was beyond anything she could imagine. Yasaka highly doubted that even the 4 great Satans would win against him even if they were fighting together at the same time. Not mentioning that he was noble and his ambitions were admirable. The yokai needed someone very powerful and kind. They needed him, and she certainly wouldn't mind having him caressing her ears and tails with his chakra-coated hands and being their guardian defender. A thought suddenly invaded her head and Yasaka sent a coy smile towards Naruto as she closed the distance between them once more and gently cupped his face, molten gold orbs memorizing and studying his visage. The thought that entered her head looked even more appealing than ever now that she concluded that the shinobi was a very handsome man. Yasaka smiled. "Naruto-sama, I think your goal is very respectable and praiseworthy, but for there to be an alliance we must talk about what both sides benefit." Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly and nodded. "You're absolutely right. How can I help you and the yokai benefit from forming an alliance with me?" he inquired, trying his utmost best to ignore the feel of the hot MILF caressing his whisker marks. The priestess quelled the urge to smirk. "Bingo! I recognize that aligning yourself with only one faction would be detrimental to your goal of achieving peace. That said, we need someone powerful like you to protect us from those with malicious intent. What I suggest is that we form our alliance through a marriage between the 2 of us." It took a lot to surprise and shock the shinobi, but the woman before him seemingly did it with ease. "I'm sorry, Yasaka-chan, but did you say we should get married?" he questioned, his head completely devoid of thoughts and ideals as he paid her utmost attention. Yasaka nodded and idly stroked his jaw. "Yes, being married to me would tell the world that the yokai are under your protection, but at the same time would tell them that you're not aligned with the faction itself, which would help you not be restricted in which group you'd like to seek out. And as for what you gain out of this, you gain a wife, a home, and the yokai's support in fostering peace." Naruto took a long minute to consider the idea. Through the usage of his negative emotion sensing ability, he could safely determine that the woman didn't harbor any malicious intent. She was being upfront and honest with her intentions, which once again brought him back to the subject. Could he marry her? She does happen to be the most beautiful woman he has ever laid eyes on, and more importantly seemed to harbor a great love for her child and her people. That last fact by itself made him appreciate her a great deal. After how miserable his childhood was, He'd be damned if he let his son or daughter have a mother who couldn't love them wholeheartedly. He could definitely see it working between the two of them. There was only one small issue. How was he supposed to collect the underwear of the finest women in the world if he were engaged to one? A solution suddenly sprang into mind and the shinobi inwardly nodded. I accept, but not right now. At her confused look, Naruto elaborated. Give it around a year's time and I'll be 100% devoted to only you. No harem or mistress, just you. But for now, I need to journey the world not just because of wanting to bring peace, but to also acquire the underwear of many very beautiful women. End Chapter 5. Chapter 6 Start. Poor Yasaka looked at the shinobi blankly, her mind unable to comprehend and believe what she had just heard. Surely she heard wrong. There was no way that he had just proclaimed with a straight face that he has to collect underwear from the most beautiful woman around the world. Pardon me, Naruto-sama, but can you repeat what you just said? Naruto gave her a smile so bright it would have blinded Lee and Might Guy. It's no problem, Yasaka-chan. To put it simply, I can't marry you until I have collected at least 300 different panties taken from the most beautiful women around the world. I already have 2, so that leaves 298 left. Though since we are talking about undergarments, Naruto grinned. May I have your underwear as well? Preferably the ones you're wearing right now if it's no hassle for you. Yasaka still looked at him disbelievingly. Despite hearing him clearly, she had no idea how to respond to his claim and request. One of his goals was collecting 300 stolen underwear. That's why he can't marry her just yet. Strangely enough, she didn't mind giving him her own undergarments, but she drew the line at him collecting undergarments from women other than herself. Naruto slowly backed away as a black aura materialized around the fox MILF's body. She sent him a ridiculously sweet smile and Naruto cringed at the sight, turning tail and getting ready to sprint away. Yasaka reacted quicker and grasped his shoulder. The shinobi winced as her nails dug painfully into his flesh. Naruto-sama, she said his name sweetly. The shinobi shivered, crying internally at his misfortune. Yes, Yasaka-chan. Won't you be a gentleman and look at me, please? At her request he turned to face her, barely holding back another cringe as he noted the feminine fury that tinted her gaze. Yasaka stared at him unamusingly. The only reason I don't bash your head right now and send you lying flat on the ground, Naruto-sama, is because I don't wish to damage my flooring. That said, she dug her nails even deeper into his shoulder, much to his discomfort. You don't ever tell a woman that you plan on stealing other women's underwear. I mean, honestly, Naruto-sama. Don't you realize how awkward that is? She ended up ranting. Naruto laughed awkwardly and winced. My bad, Yasaka-chan. Can I ask you let go of my shoulder though? She acquiesced to his request, shaking her head disapprovingly at the human. 268. The shinobi looked at her confused before recognition crossed his features. You're giving me 30 different panties from your underwear collection. Yasaka nodded, still giving him a deadpan look. Yes, but I expect you to finish your quest in 6 months rather than a year, and let me make it clear that you are to visit me in Kuno at least once in every 10 days. Naruto smiled and nodded. I can do that. And allow me to make it perfectly clear that after 6 months, not only will you get rid of all the underwear you collected except for the ones I'll give you, you won't even look at another woman except me for the rest of your life. Understood? She demanded. As far as she was concerned, Naruto Uzumaki was the ultimate prize. Immensely powerful, exceptionally handsome, possessed noble and respectable ambitions, and the feel of his chakra, the energy tied to his soul, was extremely pleasing to her yokai instincts. He was perfect and she had just claimed him. He was hers. Sure, he may have been more perverted than most men she had met or dealt with, but the pureness and warmth that emanated from his chakra more than made up for that. The shinobi inwardly smiled. He could definitely picture himself falling madly in love with this ferocious vixen given time. Hell, he was already fond of her despite meeting her less than 24 hours ago. Though it was pretty hilarious and adorable how she was already acting like she was his wife. Yasaka-chan, or rather Yasaka-heim, you are the Tsunade to my Jiraiya. Yasaka blinked and gave him a perplexed look. Sorry? Naruto chuckled. I'll tell you about it some other time, but I accept your proposal. In 6 months' time, I am yours 100%. She smiled pleasantly, fluttering her eyelashes at her new husband to be and whispered in a seductive tone. Good, then as your unofficial fiancé, I'd like you to come into our bedroom where you can coat your hands and fingers with that beautiful chakra of yours and to pet my ears and tails. Ashura's reincarnation gave her a soft grin. What are we waiting for then? The priestess giggled and grabbed a hold of his arms, gently pulling him towards the direction of the master bedroom. They walked in comfortable silence, Naruto discreetly eyeing Yasaka's huge sensors and how they bounced with a softness that had his mouth watering. Life is good. Time skip. 3 days later. Do you really have to leave, Oni-chan? Kuno couldn't help but question, a pout on her face as she looked at the man who played with her and took her to parks the past couple of days. Naruto got down on one knee so they could be at eye level. I'm afraid I have to, Kuno-chan. The reasons are hard to explain, but I can't stay here until I fulfill my dream. That said, I did promise your mother to come visit every 10 days and to bring gifts. A large happy smile replaced the 10-year-old's pout. Bring me chocolate, she demanded. A pointed cough and a sharp glare from the older Kyuubi standing to the side had Kuno looking sheepish. Please, she added. The shinobi gave her a grin. No problem, Kuno-chan, I'll get you all the chocolate the world has to offer. Kuno pumped her fist in the air much to the amusement of the adults, then scampered off after a quick hug towards her big brother figure. Naruto shifted his attention towards the priestess and gave her a small grin. Yasaka-hime, it may just be a week and a few days from now till I see you again, but I will miss you and Kuno-chan dearly. You will be missed too, Naruto-sama. Try visit earlier if time permits you to do so. I would still like to get to know my mate better, she requested softly. A gentle smile plastered on her heart-fluttering visage as she appraised her fellow blonde before she wrapped her arms around him in a hug. Having grown very fond of him in the past couple of days. He may have been quite perverted, but Yasaka couldn't help but appreciate how the man would help her whenever she was stressed or tired, be it by washing the plates and utensils in the kitchen or by giving her a back or foot massage when she returned home after staying cooped up in her office all day. Not mentioning when he played with her ears and tails. He did many things that made her happy that she chose him as her mate. But the main factor was that he cared and looked after her daughter when she didn't have time, taking her out to the park and buying her ice creams or simply spending time with her watching Disney movies. Treating her like his baby sister. Giving the already high-scoring shinobi even more points. The grin on Naruto's face transitioned into a relaxed smile as he hugged the women back, for once not thinking of how wonderful Yasaka's chest felt pressed against his own. He was right, the more time he spent with Yasaka, the more he saw the possibility of him actually falling in love with her increase. He jokingly called her the Tsunade to his Jiraiya, but it seemed that what came off as a joke might actually come to be true. On a side note, he had to admit that he liked being called her mate. Something about that particular word felt right to him. Yasaka broke off the hug but clutched the Jinchuriki's shirt tightly, much to his confusion. Yasaka-hime? The female blonde smiled coyly before she tugged the shinobi towards her, smashing her lips against his in a searing and very hungry kiss. Naruto's eyes widened in shock before he instinctively relaxed them and wrapped his arms around her, one hand clutching her tiny waist while the other tenderly stroked her back as he returned her passionate kiss. Yasaka poured as much of her womanly charm into the kiss, moaning in contentment as she found the shinobi to be quite a good kisser. They locked lips for what seemed like hours, their entire world revolving around just making the other feel good, only finally breaking it off when the need for oxygen proved to be too great for them to continue. The vixen playfully nibbled at his lower lips as she retreated. Naruto panted heavily from the exhilarating and dizzying kiss given to him by the hot MILF, feeling lightheaded from the intimate exchange. He may have been engaged with her for 3 days now, but despite taking after his godfather in being a high-class pervert, he still had too much honor in him to swiftly put the moves on her. A rather ironic contradiction that amused Yasaka to no end, that a pervert on the scale of Odin's level such as he would not sleep with her even when she's willing because he believed the act of censored and even kissing should be gradual and slow. Still, she found her admiration and respect for her newly betrothed swelling that he had the control and will to control himself in such a manner, especially when she was aware that her looks was ranked among the highest in the supernatural world. That, Yasaka wheezed out through her panting, is, so, you could, return back faster. Naruto nodded and smiled goofily before he turned around and walked away, wholeheartedly happy that he made the decision to start his quest of world peace with the Yukai faction. Censored it that he couldn't get the chance to interact with the Shinto faction as well, but he'd get there eventually. Now which faction should I meet next, I wonder? Naruto hummed happily as he whistled a merrily jolly tune. Well, first I should check up on my new student, even if he doesn't know that he's my student. Going back to Kuo it is. Icha Icha Paradise. A book that had been recently published and released for only 2 days, skyrocketed in popularity and became the most sought-out book in both the human and supernatural world. How could it not? The scenes, the vivid description, the characters themselves, everything about the book was just absolutely phenomenal, and when such an art that surpassed the work of Shakespeare was released out to the world, it was only natural that one Jiraiya of the Sannin would be the person everyone was searching for. Icha Icha Paradise was a phenomenon that would never be forgotten, and unknown to the entire population of perverts including one Issei Hyodo. It was the first step for the blonde Jinchuriki to be recognized by his student as the most legendary figure in all of existence. Naruto smiled and waved cheerfully at the blushing girls passing by the hallway. The delighted squeals that followed right after as he continued striding forward was music to his ears. The blonde was currently heading to the class he shared with the infamous perverted trio, an elaborate scheme to have a one-on-one time with his soon-to-be student in his head. He made it within a minute and right before entering, created 2 shadow clones that immediately hanged into an average-looking pair of male students who proceeded to walk a distance away. With his objective done, he entered the classroom that would serve as his temporary base of operations. All the students and the teacher turned their heads towards the sounds of the door sliding, and the females promptly squealed happily as their eyes set on the recently dubbed King of Kuo Academy, almost deafening the ears of the few male students in class. Hi everyone, I apologize for not being around the past few days, but there was an unfortunate accident that revolved around a dear friend of mine. I do hope you all forgive me for not being around. Naruto smiled apologetically and bowed. Naruto barely suppressed the smug smirk that almost crossed his features as the class erupted into screams and bellows. Of course, we forgive you, Naruto-kun. You're so amazing, skipping school to be there for your friend. Naruto-kun. I love you. Ah, what a sweetie. Similar proclamations and cries followed, and the shinobi smiled pleasantly towards the ladies who swooned at the sight. Smart, handsome and caring. If only the boys here were like you, Naruto-sama. A random girl shouted. Naruto internally chuckled. With that, the announcements that followed were less than kind towards the male students who slumped dejectedly. Why can't you perverts learn from Naruto-kun's example? These men are crazy for not idolizing Naruto-sama. If only the perverted trio were 1/10 as noble and handsome as Naruto-sama. Die, you useless wastes of space. Each proclamation was crueler than the last, and the shinobi had to bite his lips so as to not ruin his image by laughing. A hard task, but one he managed, albeit with great struggle. Thank you ladies for the kind words, it is much appreciated. Naruto bowed once more before he walked towards an empty seat right next to the leader of the perverted trio. He sat down and smiled pleasantly once more at the love-struck women before the teacher finally regained control of herself and managed to continue on with the lesson. A blush on her face as she realized just how inappropriate she was being by lusting and drooling over one of her students. Nonetheless, she focused on delivering the lesson, and for the most part everyone listened attentively to her lecture. How unfortunate that it would soon be interrupted once more. The blonde shinobi waited patiently for about 5 minutes like planned before a thunderous bellow from one of his hanged clones in the hallway was heard by all the students in the classrooms. WHAATTTT. Rias Gremory is currently naked in the student council's room. Damn. Let's go check it out, man. Such a declaration stunned everyone within hearing range, the teachers, the male and female students, the janitor on the other side of the hallway. None were expecting such an announcement. Naruto quickly grabbed a hold of Issei's shoulder, and just in the nick of time, everyone quickly snapped back to reality and chaos ensued as brothers and sisters, comrades and colleagues all fought and pushed one another as they sprinted out of the classroom and towards the room of the student council. The truth was revealed as each person's inner character was unveiled for the world to see. The men losing every form of coherent thoughts as they only wished to have a large glimpse of Rias's curvaceous body. One half of the women being like the men in their desires, while the other half wished to desperately shield the body of one of their precious idols. Issei glared and desperately tried to remove the iron-solid grip on his shoulder. You fool! Do you not realize the opportunity that was given to us? Naruto chuckled. Rias Gremory isn't in the student council's room and she's not naked. That announcement you heard was fake. And why should I believe you? I don't have any reason to trust what you say or to even listen to you. Then perhaps I should give you a reason to listen to me, the shinobi calmly replied, pulling out a book from inside his blazer. He showed it proudly towards the shell-shocked pervert. This book is the sequel to Icha Icha Paradise, Icha Icha, the MILF Conquest. Naruto quickly pulled the book away as Issei tried to reach for it, letting go of the boy's shoulder now that he had his complete attention. All the disdain in Issei's eyes faded away as he looked at what he deemed to be heaven on earth. Woa! Where did you get that? Do you know Jiraiya-sama? Can I meet him please? I'm his biggest fan? He would have continued blabbering had Naruto not raised a palm to stop him. Jiraiya is my godfather and I have all his work and books because I inherited his will, Naruto replied nonchalantly. Shock did not even begin to describe just how surprising the revelation was to the leader of the perverted trio. Lord Jiraiya was dead. The handsome piece of shit was his godson. A full minute passed before Issei regained enough clarity to look solemn towards the blonde. I'm sorry for your loss. Naruto closed his eyes briefly, pushing away the grief that afflicted him. Thank you, but I'm sure you're wondering why exactly did I hold you back and revealed this all to you. Issei nodded, immensely curious about the King of Ko's reason. To put it simply, my godfather Jiraiya, as you can obviously tell, is no regular pervert. On the contrary, he was on an entirely different class of his own. His rank was the super pervert. Stars shone on the boy's eyes as he paid deep attention to Jiraiya's godson. That's so amazing. Naruto chuckled. Indeed, and it was because of his wisdom, guidance and lessons that I too transcended to reach a class of super pervert and even beyond that to eventually reach a class previously thought to be unattainable, the Omega pervert. Issei's knees quivered at the revelation. The Omega pervert? Does such a class really exist? He questioned softly, knees finally giving out as he looked up to the blonde with increasing amounts of admiration and hope. The shinobi smiled and bobbed his head. You're looking at one. When I first heard about your ambition to gain a harem and even become the harem king, I was surprised that there existed such potential within you, but then I got to thinking that in order for you to reach your ambition, you needed a great role model, and that's when I decided that I would take you on as my student. You would really do that for me? The harem-thirsting boy looked one step away from being on the verge of tears. But I'm not worthy. Naruto sent him a small smile. I believe you are. He extended a hand towards the downed boy. Poor Issei clutched the hand as though it was the only ticket to finding his redemption. Naruto pulled him up and the lower-class pervert gazed at him with so much respect and admiration that one would have wondered where the disdain he seemed to harbor for the blonde 10 minutes ago went to. What do I call someone so honorable and respectable such as you? He inquired with utmost seriousness. The shinobi grinned. Call me Sensei-sama. Hi, Sensei-sama. How wonderful. Naruto slapped his palms together, a pleased expression marring his face. Now I can't exactly get a harem. I was planning on doing so to help you, but then I met the most gorgeous and feisty vixen in existence and she threw my plans right out of the windows. He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. So, all I can do is teach you my ways. Build you up until it would be a pleasure for people to build monuments for you. How does that sound to you, my new apprentice? A tidal wave of joy and euphoria washed over Issei as he bobbed his head excitedly. Yes please Sensei-sama. Hours had passed since the interaction between the Omega pervert and his new apprentice. School had just ended and Naruto found himself strolling through the campus of the academy. Today had gone even better than planned and even a blind person could see just how joyful the shinobi was feeling. He caused utter chaos on school, got a reverent and obedient student, and he still had even more time to improve his day. Really the only thing he needed to do was find another pair of underwear belonging to an attractive woman and add it to his collection. And find a place to store them so that Yusakaheim doesn't get rid of them. He refused to let his underwear collection go to waste. Dabbao. Was he going to commit to Yusaka 100%? Definitely yes. But that hardly meant that he wanted all his work and effort to go to waste, which is why he needed a place to store them. So lost in thought, he almost didn't notice the massive infrastructure right ahead of him. Oh, now this is interesting. Curiosity gripped the shinobi as he stopped on his track to marvel at the schoolhouse. Naruto being Naruto decided to check it out, casually making his way towards the entrance while activating his stealth cloak technique so as to make himself invisible and mask his scent. It was a technique his master had created in order to perv on the women inside the hot springs without them knowing. He'd usually be inside with them and could even be sitting right next to them, and he could only be caught if an exceptional censor was among the batch of women he would be peeking on. Well, if he let loose a few pervy giggle, which is something his godfather did quite often, much to his amusement. Naruto had much better self-control than his godfather, and he improved the steel cloak technique so only the absolute best of censors could detect his presence. Opening the door silently, he made his way inside and internally whistled at all the books and furniture inside. The sound of people talking reached his ears, and Naruto turned his head to the right towards the origins of the voices, spotting a slightly open door quite a few meters away from where he stood. He silently ambled his way there until he was but a meter away. But Okawa-sama, why does Odo-sama insist on marrying me to Riser? Hasn't he seen just how detestable and unmannerly Riser portrays himself out to the public? He has Rias-chan. It pains me to say this, but he does not care about how you feel in regards to this. I have tried my best to convince him otherwise, but he is most insistent that you do not rebel against his wishes. Naruto frowned, already understanding the young woman's circumstances. Wanting a better view and context of the situation, he squeezed himself inside through the gap between the door and doorframe. Under normal circumstances, the shinobi would have immediately drooled at sight of an extremely attractive brunette with larger-than-life assets, but having just heard all that had been said, Naruto found himself frowning as he eyed the mother and daughter pair. Rias sniffed, lips trembling as the gravity of her mother's words finally hit her with force of a speeding train. So you're saying that I'm not even allowed to fight FF for my freedom? She choked out. Venelana felt her heart break at the sight, inwardly cursing the bastard she called husband for putting her daughter in such a sorrowful state. She gently cupped Rias's face, caressing her visage with all the love and care in the world before she slowly wiped away the tears. I won't let anything happen to you, baby. I will protect you. Through the haze of uncertainty, despair, and sorrow, the confident and comforting tone of her Venelena's voice along with the unmistakable look of love in her eyes is what caused Rias to feel relief and hope for a better life. She buried her face in her mother's chest, wrapping her arms around her as she wept. Naruto felt shame course through him for spying on what was supposed to be something private and intimate. He pushed the guilt away, vowing instead to also help Rias with her plight. Looks like I'll be heading to the underworld very soon. He was so going to beat up the bitch that was supposed to be Rias's father. Just the idea that someone would force such an affair on their offspring and not care at all about how they felt. He was most definitely going to find enjoyment in driving his fist on the bastard's face. Venelana lovingly kissed the top of her daughter's head, hugging her youngest comfortingly in an effort to help soothe her pain. I will take care of him. In the meantime, I want you to focus on your studies, okay? She uttered softly. Rias nodded her head softly and slowly backed away. Thank you, Okawa-sama, she sniffed. The matriarch of the Gremory clan smiled gently. Anything for my precious little girl. Now come give your mother another hug before she has to leave. If that is what you want. Rias shook her head, giggling slightly as she once more hugged the most important person in her world, Venelana, naturally more than happy to do the same. Naruto looked off to the side, determined to at least give the mother-daughter pair one moment of privacy. Almost a whole minute passed before they finally separated, Venelana wordlessly forming a large teleportation circle, catching Naruto's attention in the process with the almost irritatingly bright light. He silently crept closer towards the Gremory matriarch until he was standing just a feet away, curiously inspecting the runes and shapes that littered the crimson circle. Something drove him to peer up, and Naruto saw the hopeful look in Rias's eyes. He felt his heart clench for the young woman and silently vowed once more to free her from her fate. The Underworld. Gremory Estate. Naruto looked around the lounge curiously, impressed with how his surroundings changed in the blink of an eye. It almost made him wonder how no one seemed to want to try change a few properties of the teleportation spell so it could be battle-oriented. His train of thought was suddenly derailed when he noticed movement on his left. Naruto shifted his attention to the woman partially responsible for bringing him here, a flush creeping on his face as his eyes finally studied the brunette's form with startling intensity. A flattering shade of milk chocolate hair sat atop her head, shimmering bangs fluttering in the air and drawing attention to the women's mesmerizing amethyst-tinted orbs. A small nose lay underneath, cupped between well-sculpted cheekbones that also helped highlight thick and ravishing pink lips. It was truly a beautiful face, far surpassing the beauty and attractiveness that supermodels could only dream of having. But of course, as a devil, a being of sin, she had to possess certain characteristics that made him see that she was not even close to being human. She didn't have any horns emerging from the top of her head, but what she did have was a body that human women could never possess unless they won the biggest genetic lottery ever. She was dressed beautifully, garbed in a sleeveless, sparkling dark green gown that exposed her delicate shoulders and collarbone while hugging her figure well, one side of the dress possessing a three-quarter slit and promising a view of heaven to those lucky enough to see. Massive perky sensors the size of Tsunade sat atop of her chest proudly, defying the laws of gravity and effortlessly tempting the desire of all men and more than a few women when a glimpse of her vast milky cleavage was revealed. Gaze slowly drifting down, he caught sight of an absolutely tiny waist, the smallest he'd ever seen in his entire life on a bodacious woman like her. Naruto quickly pinched his nostrils with both hands as Venelena's dainty waist exploded into a mouth-watering and eye-poppingly wide hips that were so large that they could not be classified as childbearing hips. Saying he was lost for words was putting it lightly. It wasn't that she possessed the broadest hips he'd ever seen, she was a close second on that list with Yasaka at first place. It was more of how her waist could curve so much into such an astonishingly wide set of hips that had him slack-jawed. It was only due to his numerous years of perving on women that he quickly regained control of himself. Deciding to continue his observation, he looked downward and suppressed the urge to whistle as he admired a set of thick and large thighs that slowly shrunk into shapely and beautifully sculpted calves. What a woman! Naruto thought unconsciously. He shook his head. You can perv and steal her underwear later. Right now I have something else to take care of. Let it be said that while Naruto Uzumaki was the biggest pervert in the multiverse, he was also simultaneously the noblest and kindest man there was. The grief that an 18-year-old girl was going through at the hands of her father of all people, it simply meant that Naruto was going to put his other talents to use. Namely beating the shit out of assholes and bastards like him. It was an idea that the matriarch of the Gremory clan also agreed with. A frown settled on Venelena's visage as she thought of the misery her daughter was going through due to her husband. She wrinkled her nose distastefully thinking about him. She walked towards the door, unknowingly walking past the blonde shinobi as she contemplated over how to free her daughter from her forced engagement. Naruto resisted turning his head. He summoned as much as willpower as he could in order to not toss a look at the devil milfs behind, determined to have his priorities set straight and help Rias. The sound of footsteps thudding against the floor slowly faded away until he could hear no more. The shinobi waited a few more seconds for good measure before he finally turned around, having concluded that the brown-haired woman was finally gone. Now all he needed was time and information, knowing who was who, what relationships they shared with another, the history and alliances of the underworld. Jiraiya had taught him the importance of having information and knowledge, along with knowing how to run a spy network. His primary objective for coming here was indeed to help Rias, but if he could influence the situation in which he could earn the gratitude of the Saiyans, he'd be killing two birds with one stone. For now, learning all he could about the Gremory clan and the underworld was necessary before he made any moves which included bodily harm towards Rias's father. Time skip. 3 days later. Venelana pursed her lips in suspicion, confused and feeling dubious about what happened to her undergarments. An exact quarter of them were gone. Considering she possessed around 80 custom-made underwear, that was a lot that she had just lost. Did she throw them away? No, she highly doubted it. She had no recollection of ever doing such a thing. Stolen? Possibly, but if so, then who would dare? She was highly respected in the underworld and even more so in here. She could hardly imagine anyone she knew, be they the staff or otherwise, stealing 20 of her underwear. She took a deep breath. You're overthinking this, Venelana. It's most likely just a part of the dirty laundry, or perhaps I just misplaced them. No need to jump to such rash conclusions. A chuckle passed her lips as she took a moment to consider what her mind conjured up. Someone stealing 20 of her underwear. It was highly unlikely. Even if there really was a thief, they'd be discreet and would go after her more valuable items such as her jewelry collection. which I already checked. Venelana shook her head and giggled. The exhaustion must have been getting to her if she started to have such weird thoughts like that. Unknown to her, her suspicion was correct, as despite wishing to stay prioritized to his mission, Naruto could not refrain himself from taking a handful of her panties when he stumbled upon her room by complete accident yesterday. He just saw the custom designs, and knowing it belonged to Rias's hot, curvy MILF of a mom, one couldn't blame him too much for being reckless and taking a large amount for himself. Naruto had been quite busy the past few days, most of his time being spent in the library, where he would gobble up the information he needed in order to make his move properly. Now normally he would have mass spanned at least 100 clones so they could do the studying for him. But such a move would alert everyone of his presence, and as a result he had to limit the number of clones created to only 10. Those 10 clones along with himself had done nothing but studying since then. Well, that wasn't entirely true, as he did need a break from studying. He did need to eat and sleep, not mentioning learning the layouts of the residence. But the point was, he was immensely busy the past few days. He did learn a lot though about the influential people, clans, and history of the underworld. He was up to date. Who would have thought that Rias was related to the leader of all devils, and that said leader, Sirzek Lucifer, was a massive cis-con? It totally caught him by surprise. Still, the situation played out to him much favorably, and for that the blonde peace seeker was not complaining. The shinobi was currently glaring daggers at the clan head of the Gremory clan, his form still concealed thanks to the stealth cloak jutsu. Naruto had to refrain himself from giving Zeoticus Gremory a beating he would never forget, having learned much about the man in the past 3 days. What he learned about the clan head did not paint him in a good light for the blonde. The only reason he hadn't attempted anything was simply because he was taught not to rush in without thinking. For a man who was supposed to represent a clan renowned for their kindness and compassion, he did the job terribly. Clearly someone else has to take over the position of clan head, as Zeoticus Gremory was not fit to represent the Gremory clan. Fortunately for them, Naruto had ample amount of time to plan and strategize. He ended up coming up with an idea that would humiliate Zeoticus, a plan that would force the clan head into freeing Rias from her fate and give up his position as clan head due to the shame that would soon follow. All that was required was but one thing: Venelena's cooperation. That should be fun. Naruto grinned. In one's home, that's where more often than not, one can find themselves most at ease. That was how it was meant to be. Yet one Venelana Gremory found herself trudging through the hallway while eyeing all the servants with utmost suspicion. 3 days of non-stop searching for her 20 missing underwear and coming up short was starting to aggravate her. What was once a mild doubt transformed into an incredible amount of wariness, as there was simply no way that she could misplace that many undergarments. Someone was behind this mischief, and Venelana vowed that she would not only uncover the mystery of who was shameless enough to do so, but she would also skin the fool alive. Bloodthirsty did not even begin to describe just how murderous the matriarch of the Gremory clan was feeling. Yet despite having the urge to lock all the servants in a single room and interrogate each and everyone until she found the heinous one, she could not do so, as such an act was unbecoming of her status as both a high-class lady and as the matriarch of the Gremory clan. Truly, at times did she hate her position. Actually, she found herself despising it more often than not. How many times did she want to go visit her firstborn just to find herself unable to, because she had to formally request an audience? It was an act she could not do regularly, as Sirzek resigned his birthright and heritage in order to be recognized as the Satan Lucifer. It would be highly improper for both the Satan and for her. Yet that was not even the worst part. Her daughter Rias was fighting desperately against her fate to be married, and the odds were heavily stacked against her favor. One would think that due to her position as the matriarch of the clan that she could cancel the arranged marriage, or at the very least help her daughter against the contract. If only that were the case. The main contributor to why she hated her position was due to her being unable to help her daughter in any way except for by talking and trying to convince that stubborn and disgusting excuse of a husband and father that Rias shouldn't be married against her will. But no matter what she said or what angle she tried to approach from, whether it was from a parent-like angle or from a financial view or even political, nothing she said seemed to faze Zeoticus in his quest of marrying her daughter into the Phoenix clan. She utterly despised being the matriarch of the Gremory clan, and she despised her vile and loathsome husband even more. With all that she had in her plate, one couldn't blame Venelana for being in a foul and unapproachable mood as she glared heatedly at the cowering servants that littered the hallway. All but one, A weird pink-haired maid fearlessly ran up to the esteemed Lady Gremory, stopping about 3 meters away and looking quite frantic as she addressed the mother of the Crimson Satan. Venelana Sama. Venelana narrowed her eyes menacingly. What is the matter? It better be important, my dear, because I'm currently far from being in a delightful mood. Her subtle threat didn't seem to register to the pinkette as she pulled out an underwear from her pocket, much to Venelana's confusion. Some strange man invaded my room and told me of how he snuck into your room and stole a mass amount of your undergarments. Venelana's eyes widened at that. She barely managed to restrain herself from grabbing a hold of the younger woman's shoulders. Where is he? What did he look like? Tell me everything, she demanded. The maid nodded frantically. He has blonde hair and blue eyes, and he also has these strange whisker-like marks on either side of his face. Right before he ran away, he said he would be by the lake at 9:30 and that he challenges you to a duel. If possible. Venelana's eyes narrowed even further, finally having the effect of intimating the shorter lady. And you're telling me the absolute truth? No form of lying or exaggeration. Why, yes. I swear I'm not lying to you. The amethyst-eyed MILF nodded. All right. I appreciate you informing me of this. What is your name? It's Sakura Haruno, Lady Gremory. The flat-chested pinkette meekly answered. Venelana gave a small pat of the shoulder and walked past the younger maid. Thank you for informing me, Sakura. With her back turned, she failed to notice the large, almost dangerous mischievous smile that crossed over the pinkette's features as she locked eyes on the back of the Satan's mother, eyes pleasurably following the sway of that massive jutting rump as it jiggled away. It's my pleasure, Vene-chan. Times skip. 3 hours later. Decades before even the birth of Sirzek Lucifer, one Venelana Gremory was known far and wide in the supernatural world for her deadly prowess and jaw-dropping beauty. Brunette Ruin Princess, that was the title she was bestowed upon and was recognized by in the supernatural world. Centuries have passed since she had last battled, but Venelana was and still is known as the strongest woman to ever emerge out of the mighty Bael clan for a reason, and she planned on educating the fool who dared to steal her panties just why he made the biggest mistake of his life. It was why she was here, standing meters away from the crystal-clear lake that was a few miles away from the Gremory mansion. A frown emerged from Venelana's visage as she searched for the blonde pervert. Almost a minute passed before she gave up on her futile search. Did that girl lie to me? She outwardly mused. She didn't. A startled scream escaped the esteemed Lady Gremory as she jumped away and immediately turned around, hand coated in the famous power of destruction and firing at the one who snuck behind her. Naruto ducked immediately and sent a grin towards the unsettled brunette. Hi. He ducked once more as another blast was sent over his head. Whoa. Calm down, Vene-chan, I just want to talk. Venelana snarled. Silence. She ran up to him and immediately engaged him in hand-to-hand combat. Having sensed his massive reserves, she knew that allowing him to utilize his energy would be a big mistake. 2 whole minutes passed, Venelana only growing more frustrated as she failed to land a single blow on her opponent as Naruto weaved and dodged her attacks yet never once attempted to strike back. How dare you look down on me? She threw a roundhouse kick. To her shock, Naruto caught the kick with ease and looked at her boredly. You're definitely stronger than Rias-chan, but I'm afraid you're no match for the ultimate pervert, he proclaimed proudly, whirling around while holding on to her calf and hurling her away. Venelana righted herself in midair and glared murderously at the blonde. What have you done to my daughter? Nothing, we fought and then we walked our separate ways, though that happened more than a week ago. Now that I answered your question, can we talk? Vene-chan the shinobi jumped away as a large purple energy sphere landed on where he previously stood, detonating and taking with it the surrounding debris. You dare to address me in such a way? Venelana questioned, livid with the audacity of the blonde who cheekily grinned at her. Naruto turned around, looked over his shoulder, and promptly smacked his bum in an effort to vex her. Judging by the way her aura intensified, he could reasonably conclude that he succeeded in his mission. Ah! Naruto screamed, squeaked as he jumped away once more from an energy blast that was aimed at his manhood. All right, that's it, no more Mr. Nice Guy. To go after his manhood of all things. This was outrageous and he would tolerate no more of the women's temper tantrum. Entering Sage mode thanks to a clone he manually dispelled, Naruto quickly leapt up in the air much to Venelena's shock and formed a Rasengan, the gap between human and devil rapidly closing as he thrust the Rasengan forward and got ready to slam it into her guts. Venelana quickly got over her shock and flew upwards in an attempt to get away, internally wondering who this man was. The power she sensed from him was immense even before his power-up, but now, she almost shivered and was relieved he didn't possess wings. If only she knew who she was dealing with. With the use of his left hand, Naruto formed two shadow clones, one who immediately placed his body in a complete horizontal position and another clone who along with himself, used the previous clone as a jumping pad in order to reach the brunette above. Venelena's eyes widened marginally and tried to fly away but came short as the clone grasped her ankle and with a mighty heave, pulled her down for the original to slam a watered-down version of the Rasengan in her guts. "Ah!" she yelled out in torment, tears materializing in her eyes from the pain. The Rasengan exploded, causing even more immense pain for the devil and sending her rocketing back down on the ground, a crater forming on where she landed. Naruto softly landed on the surface of the lake and calmly walked up to his opponent, inwardly feeling guilty as even a weakened version of his signature move could still do plenty of damage. Though in his defense he expected more out of the durability of a devil's body. Agony was all that was felt as Venelana attempted to get up, a glance downward showing just how nastily bruised her stomach was. She hissed in pain and attempted to ignore her injuries as she pushed herself up only to fall back down. "Here, let me." The power of destruction instantly materialized in Venelena's palm as she thrust her attack towards the blonde's face in an attempt to kill him. Naruto reacted quicker and grabbed a hold of her wrist, gazing coolly at her even as the purple sphere was just mere centimeters away from his visage. "I am not your enemy." Right after he said that, a shower of gold erupted, temporarily blinding Venelana as Naruto entered his six-path Sage mode state. A whole 10 seconds passed, one in which during the entire duration Venelana clenched her eyes shut, fear gripping her core as she sensed the massive amount of power that would have easily brought her down on her knees had she been standing up. So terrified by his power, she couldn't think coherently, but if she could, she would realize that his power equaled that of Great Red. And with the barrier that naturally encompassed over the entirety of the Gremory clan's land, no one outside the barrier could sense the power up and come to her aid. It took a couple more seconds until she registered that nothing happened. She slowly opened her eyes, wariness present in her lavender-tinted orbs as she gazed into the transformed state of her opponent. Silence stretched between the pair as Venelana observed his glowing form with Naruto just giving her all the time in the world. A slight shift on the torso had Venelana hissing in pain, a fact that Naruto immediately registered as he brought his right palm towards her belly. The brunette ruined princess immediately attempted to back away but failed, hissing even more as pain erupted all over her nervous system. Naruto raised his hands in an effort to calm her. "Hey, I won't hurt you, please trust me when I say that I can help." He slowly lowered his palm while holding eye contact with the brunette's fearful purple orbs. Gently he landed his palm on her wound, sending her an apologetic expression when she winced in discomfort. Seconds passed before Naruto eventually pulled his palm away, a healed torso in place of what was once a damaged and heavily bruised stomach. All traces of pain seemed to disappear from her system, a look downwards towards her belly revealed unblemished and smooth skin. Venelana looked back up confusedly at the blonde. "You healed me, why did you heal me?" Naruto shrugged his shoulders casually, his transformation fading as his form returned back to its base state. "You were hurt and I had the power to heal you, so I did." But I'm your enemy." He frowned and shook his head. "No, you're not." Slowly, Venelana got back up, all the while maintaining eye contact with the whiskered blonde. "Who are you?" she questioned, curiosity dripping from her tone. The shinobi smiled. "Naruto Uzumaki, all-around badass and the ultimate pervert," he proudly introduced himself. Venelana face faulted. A rather impressive accomplishment as hardly anything fazed her nowadays. She got back up, gritting her teeth and sporting a vein that budged on her forehead due to the blonde menace. "I am well aware that you're a pervert. After all, you had the nerve to not only steal, but announce that you're the one who took 20 of my underwear." A chuckle escaped Naruto as he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "My bad about that, Vena-chan. I honestly tried my best to not let myself get distracted, but I'm afraid you and your panties were too irresistible." Frustration intermingled with confusion as the matriarch of the Gramarye clan glared at him. Why did you fight my daughter? How does she relate to this? Well, if you really want to know. He shrugged his shoulders. She came to me, not particularly pleased that I took her best friend's underwear. We agreed to have a match with stipulations that I then won. After that we went our separate ways. Dread did not even begin to express how alarmed Venelana was feeling at the knowledge gained. The stipulations, what were they? Naruto brought a hand to his chin, stroking his non-existent beard while humming exaggeratingly. Well. He mischievously drawled out, a grin appearing on his visage as he could sense the frustration boiling within the brunette. To put it simply, if I won, which I did, she would give me her underwear, owe me a favor of any kind, and I believe the last stipulation was her giving me a 10-minute sensory dance while wearing a swimsuit outfit of her choice. She already has given me her panties, that leaves only the favor and the dance, he added. I'll owe you a favor of any kind as long as my daughter Rias owes no favor to you. The same goes for the dance. Venelana instantly proposed, more than willing to do everything she could to lessen the weight on her daughter's shoulders. Naruto's eyes briefly softened, a mother who would do anything and everything for her child. He was really starting to like her. I'm willing to accept the favor transfer, but not so much with the swimsuit dance, that I'm afraid Rias-chan still owes me. Venelana let out an unladylike grunt but nodded. Very well, now what I wish to know is why you are here. Why have you been trespassing for the past few days? And why did you seek me out? A terrifying grin emerged from the blonde's features. That's very simple, I've come to free Rias-chan from her arranged marriage and I need your help in doing so. He sent a thumbs up to the flabbergasted devil. She blinked. You're here, to help my daughter? She asked unsurely. I am. He nodded. But why? Venelana demanded to know, immensely worried about what the blonde's help could mean for her youngest. Naruto felt his eyes soften once more, because I want to help. A scoff escaped the brunette's lips as she shook her head. Nobody helps for free, she stated evenly. I do. He stated seriously, all traces of mischief and amusement fading away from his eyes. Silence encompassed the pair as Venelana gazed deeply into the windows of Naruto's soul, searching fruitlessly to find anything that pointed to a hidden or malicious agenda, but ultimately seeing nothing but plain honesty and a genuine desire to help. Still, despite what she found, Venelana couldn't help but question the strange but powerful human she had just fought, needing to be absolutely certain she could trust him with her daughter's future. You really do wish to aid my daughter? Naruto nodded softly. Yes, I believe that if you can help someone, then you should. I also believe that everyone should have the right to decide who they want to marry. Those two reasons are why I want to help Rias-chan if it's alright with you, and if it helps my case, I'm not planning to help in order to receive more favors or anything like that. Venelana closed her eyes briefly, pondering and reflecting about everything that had been said and done. Here was someone with a strength that rivaled and possibly exceeded the strongest the supernatural world had to offer. He showed her mercy, showed her daughter mercy, healed her wounds, and he seemed to possess the desire to truly help her youngest child. The mother in her was scared, scratch that she was frightened of him harming Rias in any sort of manner. But the logical part of her knew that if he truly wanted anything and he was a bad person, there would be absolutely nothing that she could do to stop him. There was much torment that he could have done to them, much pain that he could have inflicted upon them and walked away unscathed, and yet nothing heinous had happened to her or Rias. On the contrary, he had only been merciful when he could have taken what he wanted by force. And that was not mentioning that while she wasn't the most capable censor in the underworld, she was still a good enough censor to be able to tell by the feel of his power, the warmth that exuded from his energy, that he really was a good and kind man. All the evidence pointed towards him being a genuine person. Having taken all that into consideration, she finally came to a decision, hope blooming in her chest at the prospect of finally being able to help her precious daughter against her marriage contract. She opened her eyes to gaze at the human, walking into his personal space and cupping his hands gently. I'm counting on you to help me free my daughter, please don't let me down, she pleaded softly. Naruto sent her a gentle smile. I promise you that Rias-chan will be free from her arranged marriage by the end of this week. Thank you Naruto Uzumaki. Venelana squeezed his hands gratefully before letting go. Now, while I would like to know what you have in mind and what part one play in your plan, I believe that is something to be discussed in a more appropriate setting, namely the kitchen where we can have a cup of tea. I like how you think, Vena-chan. He gave her a thumbs up. Venelana giggled and looped her arm around his, gently dragging him towards the mansion. Why thank you, young man. We are no doubt in for a pleasant conversation, and while we walk there, I think it would be a wonderful idea for you to tell me just why exactly did you steal so many of my underwear, she said cheerfully. The shinobi cringed. He knew stealing her underwear would be a bad idea. Well, you see, I have many goals. One of them in particular involves you stealing my panties. Venelena's cheerful features no longer looked cheerful as she deadpanned at the shinobi. Naruto laughed nervously. Something like that. One of my goals is to have amassed at least 300 underwear from the most beautiful women in the world, and as it so happens, you are one of the most beautiful that I have ever laid eyes upon. A giggle escaped her as she laid a tender hand on her cheek. Flattery will get you everywhere, young man. That said, I didn't think someone so young would find someone so old like me to be so beautiful. He looked at her incredulously. Vene-chan, you are gorgeous. No, you're beyond gorgeous. You're literally tied for first place for the most attractive women I've ever seen. And he meant it. The women before him equaled Yasaka in beauty. Honestly, the only reason he hadn't been blushing when he gazed at Venelena's visage, a visage belonging to a goddess, was because he had already developed an immunity after being around Yasaka for almost a week. Ah, you're such a sweetie. She stopped them in their tracks, raising a hand and gently pinching the blonde's cheek much to his confusion. But I still don't appreciate you stealing my underwear. Naruto felt dread grow in his stomach as Venelana smiled pleasantly, perhaps a bit too pleasantly. The way he felt was understandable as she then proceeded to twist her fingers almost painfully. Oh, Hours had passed since the interaction between the hero of Konoha and the brunette ruin princess. Once having arrived in the Gremory mansion, the unusual duo parted with the intention to reconvene once more in one of the unoccupied guests' room, Naruto till then being given access to a room of his own that came with plenty of clothes of which he could choose to wear or take along with a bathroom where he could either shower or relax in the hot tub. It was a nice experience after having to sneak around for the past few days. But what made the occasion all the more delightful was the fact that he had a private chef assigned to him by Venelana. Said chef was currently delivering 10 more cups of ramen while glaring at the blonde distastefully, having had enough of the whiskered man who had already eaten around 50 cups worth of ramen. Did a black hole exist in the blonde's stomach? That was a question that Venelena's personal chef wondered as he set the tray on the table and inwardly prayed to Satan that he would no longer have to make any more of that infernal and bland recipe. Naruto paused mid-slurp, glaring menacingly at the chef who took a step back. Did you just call ramen, the food of the gods, infernal and bland? The chef reeled back, unaware that Lady Gremory's guest could hear his thoughts. No, I can't hear thoughts, you dumbass. That's insane. Naruto shook his head at the stupidity of the chef. He must have been going crazy being cooped up in this place. I know your thoughts because the ramen god told me of your blasphemy. Pardon me. The chef tilted his head in confusion. Ramen has a god. Said God told the blonde menace of how he disrespected ramen? Naruto rolled his eyes. Just leave me be. I can no longer tolerate your presence after how you disrespected ramen of all things. Happiness surged deep from within the chef's chest at the prospect of finally getting a break. Nonetheless, he was hired for his professionalism and etiquette, and despite how annoying his host was, he still needed to maintain decorum and respect. Thank you for excusing me, sir. Do let me know if you wish for anything. With that said, he promptly turned around and proceeded to stride away, leaving the blonde to stew in rage at the blasphemy of someone disrespecting the recipe favored by the gods. I shouldn't have let him get away. Instead, I should have given that pompous bastard the nastiest wedgie in the history of all wedgies, then hang him up from the ceiling so everyone can see how pathetic he truly was. A giggle reached the shinobi's ears, snapping him out of his ramen-induced rage. Naruto tossed a curious look towards the entrance of the kitchen and promptly sniffed so the blood wouldn't leak from his nose as one Venelana Gremory came strutting in, looking like a powerful yet seductive businesswoman. Garbed in a brown pencil skirt that easily illuminated and showcased her wondrously thick and meaty thighs along with a button-up white shirt that struggled to contain a whole lot of women, she looked absolutely bewitching before the blonde. Naruto watched on with rapt attention as the gap between them slowly narrowed, Venelana taking small measured steps so as to not shred the skirt that desperately hugged her broad hips, and considering her hips were almost twice the width of her shoulders, that alone meant that her bottom half was insanely wide. And her censored were so big. He honestly had no idea how she managed to stuff them in her shirt or how she managed to have her shirt all buttoned up when they were so huge. Though to be fair, it did look like the buttons would fly right off if she made any sudden movements. So awestruck by her beauty, he didn't realize his mouth was hung open as she finally reached him until she gently placed her hand underneath his jaw and slowly raised it upwards. Naruto felt himself blush hard. Venolana sat down and sent him a small teasing smile. "Hello Naruto-kun. I hope I'm not bothering you at this time." It was through sheer will alone that Naruto somehow managed to stop himself from blushing anymore as his eyes locked onto Venolana's mesmerizing amethyst-colored orbs. No, not at all. If anything, I'm grateful for the hospitality shown towards me. Thank you, Vena-chan. She giggled. You're very welcome. Before we resume our conversation, may I get you anything? Water? Tea? Food? The shinobi smiled but shook his head. Thank you once more for the hospitality, but I'm good. I was actually putting your chef to a workout, he revealed sheepishly. A small laugh escaped the matriarch of the Gremory clan. Yes, I did see him on my way here. He looked positively happy. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. I think I might have gone a little overboard with the food requests. That's all right. I'm pleased to hear that you had a good time since I had last seen you a few hours ago. Thank you again. He nodded his head in gratitude. Venolana smiled as she laid a hand on his shoulder. It was my pleasure. Now please tell me what you had in mind. The shinobi grinned. Zeoticus fancied himself as both a capable and an effective businessman. After all, it took cunning, intelligence, and sheer ruthlessness for one to amass a vast quantity of financial and political power like he had. Long before the birth of Sirzek and long even before his marriage with Venolana, Zeoticus distinctly remembered a time when the Gremory were just considered an average clan, perhaps even a bit below average due to the clan's reputation of being kind and merciful to their own servants. The Gremorys to everyone else were just nothing special, and he remembered how much it had wounded his pride when he had learned of that fact. It was after when he had inherited the position of clan head that he vowed to make the Gremory known as the most important clan in the underworld. Many centuries later, and Zeoticus found himself close, extremely close to grasping his dream. Thanks to his marriage to Venolana Biel, now Gremory, along with the numerous alliances with the other clans, and his son becoming a super devil. The Gremory clan was considered the second most influential clan in the whole underworld, just right behind the Biel clan, the true rulers of the underworld. But Zeoticus was not satisfied with second place. To him, it was either number one or not, and he vowed that his clan, the Gremory, would be the most powerful clan in the underworld. It was for that reason that despite his daughter's incessant begging and his wife's obvious disapproval that Zeoticus sought a marriage contract with the Phoenix through his daughter. So what if his daughter married a devil against her wishes, a devil who in his wife's words had no redeeming or admirable qualities? It mattered not to him that it meant the world for Rias to have her freedom and marry whoever she wanted. As far as he was concerned, she was nothing but a pawn whose sole purpose of existing was to only contribute to ensuring that their clan earned the might and prestige that they so rightfully deserved. If the marriage happened and Zeoticus was dead set on letting it happen, not only would they finally have easy access to the famous Phoenix Tears, but more importantly, their influence and power would finally rival and perhaps even surpass the great Devil King clan. The possibilities excited him. So lost in thought, Zeoticus almost didn't notice the door to his office opening as his wife walked in. Good afternoon, my dear husband. Venolana greeted demurely. Zeoticus narrowed his eyes, inwardly wondering as to why his spouse visited him when she usually went out of her way to be away from his presence. Well, regardless of this unexpected development, he still needed to maintain a touch of decorum and class. It was after all to be expected from the clan head of the soon-to-be most powerful clan ever to be elegant and well-mannered. Good afternoon to you too, my dear wife. May I know what brought you to my study chambers? Venolana giggled as she sashayed her way to him, large bountiful censoreds jiggling within the confines of her outfit and effortlessly capturing the clan head's attention. He barely suppressed a groan, wanting nothing more than to tear away the dress that did nothing but emphasize her sinful, voluptuous form. It had been years since he laid with his wife, and despite having all the women in the world to try please him, it did nothing to satiate the thirst he held for her. Is it wrong of me to wish to see and spend time with my handsome husband? She censored an eyebrow amusingly. Zeoticus smiled charmingly as he stood up. Not at all, your presence has been greatly missed. And that was an understatement. Tension had existed between the two of them ever since that fateful day where he and Lord Phoenix had negotiated a contract, but it was especially in these last 4, maybe 5 years where Venelana made herself exceedingly scarce in his company unless it was to try convince him against marrying their daughter. This isn't another attempt, I hope, at trying to annul the marriage? Venelana shook her head gently, stopping once half a meter away to gaze up at his light blue eyes. Eyes she had once upon a time loved and enjoyed drowning herself in. No, I have realized the futility of my efforts. Hope bloomed in his chest as Zeoticus raised a hand to cup her cheek. Then you truly are here for me? She nodded softly. Yes. Ha 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 ha. Zeoticus laughed. Then let us depart to our chambers. It has been far too long since I gazed upon your beautiful form. Venelana giggled. Such a charmer, but that only makes this act ever more pleasurable for me. He hummed in confusion. Suddenly, the gentle smile on Venelana's visage washed away. What rose in its place was a scowl so frightening that the Gremory clan head almost stepped back. Now filled with immense worry and trepidation, Zeoticus failed to react in time as Venelana delivered a powerful hook that sent his body whirling towards where his back had been facing, watching with satisfaction as her husband's body swiftly dropped on the floor. Damn. Naruto whistled as he entered the office, nodding approvingly towards the brunette as he eyed the unconscious form of Rias's biological father. You got a killer left hook, Vene-chan. Venelana scowled as she gazed at her husband's unmoving form. Asshole deserved it. The man had no regards or care for our daughter, and I wasn't about to forget all the sorrow and pain he put her through. From all that I've learned and witnessed, it's quite clear to me that he doesn't deserve the title of father. No, he doesn't. She shook her head before she tossed a curious look over her shoulder. How does this seal of yours work exactly? Can a seal really stop him from confessing about what we will do to him? Naruto nodded. Of course, the concepts of seals themselves when in the hands of a seal master is only limited by the imagination of said seal master. A man I know created an instantaneous teleportation technique using seals, and unlike your teleportation spells, this one can be utilized for combat. That's pretty impressive, and would you say you're better than that man? I'd like to think so, considering I learnt and mastered his technique in the span of 2 weeks. Naruto wasn't going to mention that it took him forming around 1,000 clones and training with them every day for that to be possible. Yes, Naruto can use the Hiraishin Jutsu or the Flying Thunder God technique. Seals were a funny thing. Now Naruto didn't know if he found the art to be fascinating because of his Uzumaki heritage or because of having his father's genes, perhaps both, or even because of something else entirely. But regardless of the reasons, when his godfather had first brought out the idea of training him in Fuinjutsu at the start of the training trip, he remembered finding the idea to be extremely exciting. By the end of the 3-year training trip, it was no exaggeration to say that Naruto had surpassed Jiraiya and was rapidly approaching the Nidaime's level of expertise when it came to seals, and considering Tobirama had created a space-time technique using seals, well, Naruto felt confident that he could proclaim himself as a seal master. Roughly around 18 months later, just before the start of the 4th Great Shinobi War, and Naruto had become unparalleled when it came to Fuinjutsu, and thanks to his mastered Hiraishin, was saving countless lives during the Jubi's onslaught. So yeah, Naruto knew for a fact that there existed no one who was better than him when it came to seals, and if there ever came a day where he was proven wrong, well, he was just going to have to become better and surpass whoever was above him. Datbeo. Venelana gazed at the blonde with no small amount of awe. I still find it hard to believe that you're human. Despite his efforts, a grin tugged at the shinobi's lips from the compliment. There is a reason why I am known as an all-around badass, Vene-chan, and to answer your question from earlier, Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. It's kinda hard to explain, but to put it simply, I devised a seal that prohibits him from trying to harm you or Rias in any form, and that includes your reputation. If he tried to tell anyone about how we tortured him until he signed all the important documents that would make you the true leader of the clan, he'll just find himself unable to, and to even attempt to speak of this would cause his nerves to stimulate the pain of having 100 elephants trample on him, Naruto added. Whoa, you continue to amaze me, Naruto, she spoke truthfully. The shinobi smiled before he quickly formed a clone that proceeded to place seals all over the office. Thank you, but in the meantime, feel free to release all your pent-up frustrations and anger on your husband. My clone just placed silencing anti-teleportation, and a barrier seal around us. No one can hear his screams and neither can he get out or can someone else get inside this office. Venelena's eyes twinkled. Is that so? Then I believe that I have quite a lot that I must share with Xeoticus, and you have the Phoenix Tears? Yes I do, and please, don't let me stop you. Naruto smiled before pulling a small bag from his pocket, dangling it for a second before returning it back. Heads up, this upcoming scene, even if brief, can be very nauseating and uncomfortable. I recommend skipping it if you're not good with a bit of violence. That said, I will try to keep it very short. Pain start. The brunette ruined princess couldn't help but giggle before she turned her sights back to her unconscious husband, a malicious grin plastered on her visage as she raised her leg high before she swiftly brought it down in order to stomp on his censored. Xeoticus woke up with a yell, tears instantly materializing in his eyes as he lurched forward and clutched at Venelena's calf, trying desperately to remove his wife's boulder-crushing foot of his wiener. Unfortunately for him, Venelana wasn't feeling very merciful as she pressed down even more forcefully before she sent and landed a painful cross-right on the bridge of the clan head's nose. Blood immediately gushed and erupted from his nostrils, but before he could even attempt to retaliate or even think, he felt Venelana clutch his hair while simultaneously lifting her shoe off his balls. With a furious yell, she yanked his head towards her and slammed her knee on his visage. Naruto winced uncomfortably as he watched on. Someone slamming their knee onto another person's face always guaranteed a lot of pain. It made him very glad that it wasn't him getting the shit beaten right out of him. With a yell, Venelana brought down her foot and stomped on her husband's face with the force of a speeding train. Pain end. Time skip. 1 hour later. Xeoticus shivered irrevocably as he lied in the corner furthest away from Venelana, throwing fearful glances towards the still murderous and vengeful-looking brunette and quietly squeaking as she glowered at him. Frankly, Naruto couldn't fault him for his reaction, as Venelana had really given her husband the beatdown in the last 60 minutes and she would have continued to beat the shit out of him had he, Naruto, not pulled her back and finally put a stop to it. The shinobi had honestly thought that the beautiful brown-haired MILF would tire herself out after 15 minutes of non-stop aggression, but he was obviously so wrong. Now during the entire ordeal there were times when Naruto had almost stepped in to put a stop to the beating, but the memory of a teary-eyed Rias kept flashing in his mind and Naruto found himself unable to show even a mediocre amount of compassion and mercy towards a man who wouldn't show any to his own daughter. Eventually, though, Naruto did have to finally end it, if only because he didn't want to waste any more time than he already had by just watching a man just get clobbered by his wife. Now one would normally expect for a man to look like one giant bruise after a full hour of ass kicking, but surprisingly enough that was not the case for Xeoticus Gremory. Those Phoenix Tear, it was nothing short of extraordinary. The sound of whimpers snapped him back to reality and Naruto watched attentively as Venelana strode to the fearful and currently vulnerable red head, his demonic energy sealed off and being no more threatening or harmful to the matriarch of the Gremory clan than a newborn baby. She stopped walking once just mere centimeters away, kneeling down so she'd be at eye level with the man she had once loved. Xeoticus, let me explain something to you. She pulled out several documents from somewhere and held them to the clan head's face. I want you to sign these papers right here, right now, and if you don't, let's just say that I still have plenty more feelings to share with you. Xeoticus took a good long look at the papers and instantly understood what it was. Documents detailing transfer of ownership and documents pertaining to divorce. In either a moment of great bravery or sheer stupidity, Xeoticus lost all semblance of fear as he glared defiantly at her. Stupid women, do you really think I would give up the position of clan head just because you can beat me up? No, I've worked too long to give it up now. And besides, Xeoticus's angered look transitioned into an amused one as he chuckled humorously at his wife. Once the great Devil Council hears of what you have done to me, not even your brother Lord Bael will be able to save you from the repercussions, not that I expect him to even try, considering he doesn't consider you as his blood. Now it was Venelena's turn to giggle as she shook her head. You must think so low of me if you think that I would act so rashly. Allow me to introduce you to my companion, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto merrily waved at the scowling redhead. Now you already know that he's quite capable. After all, you can't access your power thanks to his seal, and here's the thing, Xeoticus. He's already created a seal that can prevent you from even speaking about today's events. Zeoticus narrowed his eyes. You're bluffing. Fortunately for me, that's not the case. Venelana couldn't help but smirk smugly. So here's how I see it. You sign these papers, I become clan head, free my daughter from your accursed marriage contract, and you along with your harem will live in the outskirts of the Gremory territory, far away from my presence. Or you refuse and I get to release more of my frustration on you until you agree to sign these papers, she added. Zeoticus scoffed. Do whatever you wish, but I will not give up on my life work. You can't intimidate me, Venelana, not to the point of making me give up on all I had worked for anyway. Venelana frowned, yet she persisted. Sign these papers and I will even allow you and your miserable harem to live a good and stable life. It can even be a way out to the human world if you'd really want. My only condition is that you stay away from me, and more importantly you stay away from Rias. I will not change my stance. In fact, there is nothing I would not change about my life except for that failure of a daughter of ours. She should have just stopped resisting and allowed the marriage to happen. Zeoticus shook his head disapprovingly, even now wondering what he had done to be cursed with such a rebellious offspring. Venelana grit her teeth in rage, just barely withholding the urge to slap her former love. Does she mean nothing to you? Do you not love her at all? What about Cerzek? Answer me, Zeoticus. Lord Gremory glared defiantly at his wife. I do not love Rias, I do not love Cerzek, and I certainly don't love their whore of a mother. Death and the feeling of utter hopelessness flooded the room as Naruto slowly walked to the sprawled on the floor red head, unleashing a deadly amount of killing intent and causing the clan head to gulp. Naruto narrowed his eyes dangerously as he eyed the trembling form of Rias's father. I've heard enough out of you. He transformed into his six-path sage mode and unleashed the full might of his killing intent at the devil. For the clan head, who could barely handle killing intent from the blonde when he was at his normal state, it was only survival instincts that helped Zeoticus not faint when confronted with Naruto's killing intent at point-blank range while in his strongest form. As it was, the redhead, who only mere seconds ago seemed to have confidence in spades, was now stuttering and unable to think coherently due to being encased in fear. Naruto lowered the strength of his K.I. killing intent and crossed his arms as he eyed the devil. You are testing my patience, and that is a bad idea. I suggest signing those documents before I actually lose my temper with you. Zeoticus nodded shakily, body covered in sweat as he breathed unevenly. Bringing out a pen from somewhere, Venelana handed the forms and pen to her trembling husband, waiting patiently for him to be done with the act. Roughly a minute passed before Zeoticus finished with all the documents, handing them back over to Venelana while fidgeting underneath Naruto's scrutinizing stare. Will that be all? Naruto shook his head. No, there is still one last thing that needs to be done. He raised his hand, fingers arched before he placed his palm on the heart of the shivering redhead. Seconds passed before he pulled his hand back after sensing the seal now becoming a part of Zeoticus. Now about the seal. Listen close, because I won't be repeating myself. He exhaled sharply. To put it simply, if you even think of trying to harm Venelana or Rias in any way, be it physically, mentally, financially, and etc., your body will freeze and you will feel immense, and I really do mean immense, pain. Even thinking or attempting to remove the seal will cause you to feel pain. This seal will stick with you for the rest of your life, and I suggest getting used to it. Do you understand? Zeoticus gulped and nodded rapidly. Why, yeah, the shinobi HMPHED. Then there is one last thing you need to know. Even if somehow you manage to escape this seal, I will still be around to protect Venelana and Rias. Do not ever think about harming them. He raised the amount of his killing intent to hammer his point and was promptly satisfied with the devil's reaction. Naruto let go of his power as he transformed back to normal, tossing a look to his right and nodding at the brunette. He's all yours, Vene-chan. Thank you. Venelana nodded at the blonde before she turned and narrowed her eyes at her now former husband. Pack up all your things and inform all the women from your harem living here to do the same. You're all not welcome here. Wordlessly, Zeoticus stood up. Swiftly walking out of the office, Naruto dropped the seals at the end, and leaving the shinobi alone with the new clan head. Naruto nodded at the brunette. Now that you're clan head, you can finally help Rias with her engagement and end it. Indeed. Venelana sent a genuine smile towards the blonde, bowing at the waist in gratitude. Words fail to express just how grateful I am for you helping me, for helping my daughter. Thank you. It was my pleasure to help Vena-chan. He replied back, a small grin plastered on his visage. Venelana giggled pleasantly before she suddenly hugged the surprised shinobi. Thank you, she uttered softly. The shinobi quickly got over his surprise and hugged her back. Of course. Time skip. One day later. Naruto curiously inspected himself in the mirror, taken aback by how he looked while dressed in a tux. Sharp blue eyes gleaming with approval. It was strange. Cool but strange. Certainly what he wasn't accustomed to wearing, but he supposed there was a first time for everything. Naruto hadn't planned on staying any longer after he had helped Venelana in her quest to help Rias, but despite his stubborn nature, Venelana somehow managed to get him to stay and had pretty much demanded him to wear this outfit for today, citing that he would need it for what she had in mind for today's surprise. What exactly did she want them to do? He had no idea, and why was the gray tux and pants necessary? He had no idea as well. Any attempt to discover the truth would result in the brown-haired MILF to giggle before playfully patting him on his cheek, much to his annoyance. He hadn't seen her for the rest of the day afterward, and Naruto figured he'd spend the entire day relaxing and meditating in the forest. Despite his cheery attitude, Naruto knew that he hadn't given himself any time to grieve over not being able to return to his home. Taking the time to contemplate and wonder how everyone back in the Elemental Nation was faring was something that he needed to do. Naruto hoped and inwardly prayed that his home world finally grasped peace. There was no need or want for senseless violence, and truth be honest, Naruto felt like meditating was something he needed in order to be at peace himself. If he was going to bring peace to this world, he was first going to have to be at peace himself, and that was exactly what the blonde planned on doing. A day later, and the shinobi was informed by one of the servants that Venelana was waiting for him in the dining hall. That's how and why the shinobi was currently attired in a classic gray tuxedo. Naruto looked over himself in the mirror one last time and was pleased with his appearance. Now might as well go so what Vena-chan has planned for me. Single quote. He walked out of the guest room and swiftly headed to his destination, occasionally waving at the blushing servants girls who'd smile and giggle in his presence. Eventually, after a couple of minutes, Naruto arrived in the dining hall and curiously noted the absence of the main lady of tonight. Strange, did I come to the wrong room? He wondered. You're in the right place. Naruto looked over his shoulder and felt his brain short-circuit as Venelana elegantly strolled inside, her womanly form attired in a beautiful, classic white and black gown decorated with small glimmering stones. The dress was held by the straps wrapped around the back of her neck and left the entirety of her upper back, along with her delicate shoulders and lithe arms exposed, while also revealing hints of the inner side of her massive cleavage. The upper part of her gown was basically shaped as a sensuous halterneck. From there, Naruto's eyes descended down and unconsciously lingered on her absurdly wide hips, hugged tightly by her dress, before they shifted down to note the entirety of her lower body concealed by the gown. It was a beautiful dress made fitting for an even more beautiful woman, and had Naruto currently had the capabilities to think coherently, he would have used this particular piece of outfit donned by Venelana as inspiration for his next book. As it was, though, the shinobi was completely and utterly speechless as his eyes drank in the sight of one of the most, if not the most gorgeous women in the underworld dressed in a hot outfit for him. Despite her best efforts, Venelana couldn't quell the urge to smirk as she slowly approached the blonde, swaying her body in a way that only continued to mesmerize the normally resilient shinobi. She stopped once a feet away and playfully pinched his cheek, awakening him from his stupor. Thank you for making me feel beautiful. Naruto blushed before he grinned charmingly. Only the prettiest women can really make me keep my eyes on them. Venelana giggled and smiled mischievously, carefully wrapping her arms around the back of his head, and with a powerful tug, buried the shinobi's face in between her two pillowy, doughy, and utterly enormous sensors, smothering him with divine softness. Poor Naruto fought with every fiber of his being in order to prevent himself from having the largest nosebleed in the history of all nosebleeds. Fortunately he succeeded, and for that Naruto was thankful. He didn't want to pull a Jiraiya when experiencing heaven. Venelana giggled. Enjoying yourself? A thumbs up was her reply. She shook her head and giggled once more before gently pulling the shinobi's dazed face from the confines of her massive mammaries. Naruto quickly regained clarity and grinned. That was enjoyable, thank you my lady. He raised her hand and gently kissed the area behind her knuckles. Though I would like to know why you wanted us to be here and with us being dressed like this. Not that I'm complaining. Purple amethyst eyes glinted with desire as they locked onto a curious and intrigued sapphire blue. Why, it's because I'd like to dance with the man who helped me free my daughter from her cruel fate, of course. If anyone would have told Naruto when he was in his academic years that he would be quite literally dancing with a devil, he would have scoffed before pranking the fool hard. Funny how one's life can transition and change in such a manner that the unthinkable was now pretty thinkable and normal. Not that Naruto was complaining, of course. He held Venolana in his arms, one hand clutching on to her waist while the other interlocked itself with her own hand, a peaceful expression crossing over his features as the woman in question had her head laid on his chest while tenderly caressing the back of his neck. They danced slowly, gently swaying against one another as the soft beat of the melody carried the pair across worlds, soft motions and subtle movement only ever enhancing the perfection of the moment that the pair created together. Venolana sighed contently, head tilting upwards so she could lock gazes with eyes so wonderfully blue. You're a good dancer. The shinobi grinned at the compliment. I once heard that while a way to a man's heart is to his stomach, the way to a woman's heart is through a dance. She nodded in agreement before giving him a teasing look. And is that how you became such a good dancer? Because you wanted to get inside the heart of girls. Naruto's grin only widened. Only the most beautiful of them, he declared while twirling her around. Venolana chuckled, eyes closing briefly as she rested her back on Naruto's chest, a small smile slithering into her visage as she heard the quiet, almost unnoticeable gasp that escaped the shinobi's lip as she pressed her rear right into his groin. But though she enjoyed his surprised and obviously pleased reaction if the big, growing bulge she felt was anything to go by, Venolana was more than aware that she too felt the consequences of her action as she felt her very essence heat up, as though a fire erupted inside her body, bringing with it an otherworldly lust that she just barely managed to avoid succumbing to. Venolana opened her eyes, looking back at the blonde responsible for the sudden and most definitely welcome turn of her life. Naruto, you have been upfront and direct with me, so it's only fair that I do the same. She uttered. He didn't reply, determined to hear her instead. I want you to marry me. She proposed, demanded. Naruto reeled back in surprise, too stunned to even voice his thoughts as he gazed at the jaw-droppingly gorgeous brunette, a brunette who slightly fidgeted as a light flush crept up to her cheeks from both her intense arousal and the embarrassment of proposing to a man. Just think about it, she tried to convince him. You marry me and you become the head of the Gremory clan, possessing power, money and influence that few in this age ever have. I don't care much about the position of clan head, so it works perfectly for both of us. That is from a business perspective. As for a more personal perspective, Venolana took 3 steps forward, back still facing the blonde as she reached behind with both hands and clutched the rear portion of her dress. She gave a powerful yank from both directions and was promptly satisfied as the back end of her gown was torn apart. Thick pale cheeks springing and jiggling out of their once tight confinement. Naruto always knew that the women before him had indeed won the genetic lottery, but only now did he grow to be aware by just how much, his groin bulging uncomfortably against his pants as his eyes traced the curves and wobbles of Venolana's staggeringly massive behind. The women in question turned around after letting the shinobi get an eyeful of her ass for 10 long seconds, sauntering up to him with a touch of seductive charm that could not be matched. Once within hugging distance, she wrapped her arms around the shinobi's neck, leaning back so the only thing preventing her from falling over was her hold on him. She sent him a lewd smile. It's pretty clear to me that we both are highly attracted to one another, and frankly speaking, her smile lost its sinful look, transitioning instead into a more genuine one. I already see myself falling in love with you, a man who has all the power in the world and can do whatever he wants yet prefers instead to show kindness and compassion to those in need. So, she moved her left hand slowly from the nape of his neck to the side of his visage, caressing his jaw and cheek while sending him a small, alluring smile. Will you be mine? Before I answer that, tell me, why exactly did you propose to me? I mean, I'm the guy who not only took 20 of your underwear but your daughter's underwear and her queen's too. Naruto asked, confusion palpable in his features as he eyed the hot brunette MILF. Venelana giggled as she shook her head. While I admit that I wasn't much too amused by your antics, I confined myself forgiving them as everyone possesses their own eccentricities. As for the proposal, I'll put it like this. Astoundingly powerful, exceptionally handsome, and a heart made out of gold, you can't blame me for wanting you as my husband. The shinobi rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. When you put it like that, I guess I can understand why. So? She eagerly awaited his answer. He smiled. Eep. Venelana suddenly squeaked as the shinobi without any warning pinched her fat rump, blushing cutely before she composed herself and lightly glared at him. Naruto chuckled before unpinching the cheek of Venelana's rear end, inwardly lamenting the loss of touching such a gloriously giant ass. Unfortunately, I can't accept Vena-chan. I'm already engaged, sort of. Venelana blinked in surprise before her eyes narrowed sharply. She let go of the blonde and took a step back. You are. To who? She calmly asked, too calmly much to the shinobi's discomfort. And what do you mean by sort of? Though her tone suggested that she was not livid, Naruto knew otherwise thanks to his negative emotion sensing ability. He could just feel the sheer anger that wrapped around the new clan leader's form. Still, he was not one to be easily intimidated, and it showed with his next response. To Yusaka, the leader of the Yukai faction, and by sort of I mean to say that we already agreed to be married, but I haven't actually given her a ring yet. He clarified, and I should buy her a ring before the next visit. Single quote. Yusaka, huh? Venelana uttered slowly, jealousy dripping from her tone. I suppose she is the one. At his confused look, she elaborated. You said that I was tied for first place in beauty with one other woman, I'm assuming it's her. Naruto nodded. It is. She crossed her arms. And why not marry me instead? I admit that both her sensors and ass are bigger than mine, but not by much. The difference in size is actually so small that it may as well not exist, and I have much more to offer than she ever will. The shinobi felt his gaze on the beautiful clan head soften a touch, knowing he hit a sore spot by his refusal. I chose to accept her proposal because I wanted her support. Yes, I'm not complaining about gaining a beautiful wife in the process, but I didn't accept just because I found her beautiful or because I'd gained some sort of political power. He explained gently, attempting to bring her some level of comfort in his reasoning. Venelana raised an intrigued eyebrow, anger and jealousy momentarily forgotten as she paid attention to his words. Her support, for what? Peace, he simply answered. World peace. Venelana took a moment to comprehend his answer and how it related to him accepting Yusaka's proposal before her eyes widened in understanding. Oh, I see now. She proposed that the Yukai faction would lend their support for your goal of world peace as long as you agreed to marry her. Precisely. Naruto nodded. Otherwise, I would have refused. Yusaka is hot, and more than that is a good woman and mother, but despite that I still wouldn't accept marrying someone I do not know, regardless of how attractive or noble they may seem. She sighed and pursed her lips. I can't say I'm not disappointed in your answer, but I at least understand why. Anyway, you said that your goal is world peace. An admirable dream if I do say so myself. The shinobi grinned. Thank you. It's an important dream of mine, and I would love to see this world and every species in it know peace, true peace. Venelana smiled genuinely and stepped forward, grasping the shinobi's hand firmly as she looked into his eyes. I believe I have a way of being able to help you with your goal. That caught his interest. I'm listening. As you no doubt know, my son is Serzek Lucifer, the leader of the devil race. Once he learns of what you did for me and my daughter, believe me when I say that he'll be more than happy to help lend his support to your goal of world peace, a goal that he himself aspires to achieve. That's good to hear. That will make Serzek the third faction leader I know who is interested in peace. She quirked an eyebrow. Which faction leader is also interested? Apart from her. Azazel. Venelana hummed. Well, regardless, I'm going to give you a note with my signature on it. Deliver it to Serzek and he'll be much more open to helping you after he reads it. A grateful smile wiggled its way to Naruto's lips. Thank you, Vena-chan. I really appreciate it. Consider that favor you owe me is done. The amethyst-eyed MILF giggled and nodded, letting go of his hands only to cup his face instead, much to his bewilderment. Vena-chan. She didn't say anything, a mysterious glint nesting in her gaze as she pulled his face down just to give him a passionate, lust-fueled kiss. Poor Naruto immediately had his brain shut down from shock, having not seen such a move coming despite his multitude of experience of being around with many attractive women, though to be fair his experience revolved more around teasing women relentlessly than it was actually kissing them. Venolana hungrily pressed her lips against Naruto's, a moan escaping her as the shinobi finally regained enough of his senses in order to kiss her back, a flush creeping up to her cheek as Naruto slipped his tongue in her mouth in order to deepen the kiss. They stayed locking lips for what seemed like forever, tongues intertwined in a mesmerizing exchange that neither of them wanted to pull back from. Eventually they were forced to retreat away from one another, lips separating but still connected by a strand of saliva as the need for oxygen hammered into their being and put an end to their passionate make-out. Naruto breathed heavily, looking at the similarly panting brunette gazing at him with clear want and desire in her eyes. What was that for? Normally Venolana would have giggled at his flustered and dazed expression, but alas in her current state she could only manage to send him an amused smirk. Just because I understand why you accepted Yasaka's proposal and rejected mine doesn't mean I'll accept it. I won't give up on making you mine. She emphasized the last part. The shinobi was floundered, at a loss for what to say. How was he supposed to reply? Venolana it seemed understood his plight because she chuckled demurely before moving her lips to his ears. Tell that bitch Yasaka to treasure every moment she has with you because it won't be long before you belong to me. She whispered seductively. She pulled back only to brush past Naruto, wide triplet birthing hips swaying with a gait that could turn hardened veteran warriors into obnoxious simps. Smack. Venolana squealed as her gigantic right buttock suffered from the mother of all slaps. The clap sending her titanic bulk of a smeat into a jiggling frenzy that could easily kill men due to the massive nosebleed that would have no doubt erupted from their nostrils. The shinobi chuckled. Only he was allowed to have the last laugh. Datbeo. Seidan conference meeting. It was a normal evening for the four Seidan. They sat at their usual chairs in the large round table, Serafal to Soroch's left and Ajuka on his right while Falbium sat across him. Currently Serzek and Serafal were just chatting it up while Ajuka tinkered with a device he took with him from his lab, Falbium living up to his sin of sloth by lightly napping. The atmosphere was relaxed, light-hearted. The opposite of the atmosphere of what people conjured up in their heads as they imagined the Saidans meeting in a room. Huga Booga. Naruto bellowed from right behind the Seidan Leviathan, causing Serafal to scream in fright and jump away while the remaining three Saidans whirled around to his direction, form extremely tense as they assessed the blonde man that appeared from virtually nowhere. Who are you? Serzek demanded as he stood up, demonic power encompassing his physique and causing an otherworldly amount of pressure to fall down upon the shinobi's shoulder. Ajuka, Serafal, and even Falbium joining in as they glared at the grinning blonde menacingly. Naruto pointed to himself. Me? He asked, feigning stupidity all the while his grin grew larger at the sight of veins bulging on the foreheads of the devil leaders. Falbium, feeling even more irritated than the rest of his brethren, possibly due to his nap being interrupted, attacked first, lunging at the shinobi who jumped away before seamlessly forming around clones much to the shock, awe, and wariness of the Saidans. The sight of numerous grinning replicas of the blonde who somehow snuck up behind Serafal bringing their hands together in a weird formation didn't fill their hearts with ease. Falbium swiftly materialized his defensive aura all the while Serzek, Ajuka and Serafal summoned every ounce of power they had at their disposal, readying themselves for what was sure to be a deadly battle. None of them recognized the intruder but for him to not only sneak into the Seidan conference meeting but also brazenly announce himself in such a manner indicated one of two things. Either he was incredibly stupid or he was incredibly powerful in order to make light of them. It went without saying but with their decades of years, none of them were willing to underestimate a potentially powerful enemy. Harem no Jutsu, Naruto whispered. Instantly the room was flooded with massive amounts of smoke. Ready yourselves, Ajuka commanded, eyes narrowing as he peered at the center of the smoke. Wordlessly the rest of the Saidans agreed to his command, patiently waiting for the vapor to subside as their signature powers materialized around them. They didn't have to wait long before they heard the drums of feet thumping on the floor echoing. And then, from the smoke emerged countless naked women bolting to the group of devil leaders, obscenely voluptuous women with sensors so large that one had to wonder how exactly did their backs not pop. Such a sight as it were effectively stunned the devil leaders, even Seraphol, who despite loving her own sister in what may have seemed in not a sisterly way, was actually not lesbian, and she too was dazed by the sight. So distracted and caught off guard by the unusual occurrence, none of them reacted in time when the naked buxom women jumped and wrapped their arms and legs around them. But fortunately or unfortunately, depending on the perspective of course, the physical contact helped the Satans regain their clarity, but just as their senses returned to them, the male portion of the leaders were swiftly knocked unconscious via nosebleeds, since they finally took note of the large sensors that were right in their faces. Seraphol sighed as the sound of laughter rang in her ears. It was quite obvious that the blonde man who snuck up on her meant them no harm. It was roughly around 15 minutes later that Serzek, Ajuka, and Falbium woke up, embarrassed expressions marring their features as the shinobi cackled at their misfortune. Serzek sighed before turning to his colleagues. Let's agree not to disclose what happened. You all can imagine the embarrassment and scrutiny that will come to us if this ever got out. They nodded swiftly, and Serzek turned his attention to the amused shinobi standing just 2 meters away. So who are you and why have you come here? My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and as for why I have come, I'll explain that only after you're done reading this. He pulled out a note from his pocket and handed it over to the intrigued devil. Serzek swiftly started reading it, and Ajuka, Falbium and Seraphol watched on curiously as their friend's face transitioned into a look of immense shock before happiness overcame his features. Serzek lowered the note down before bowing gratefully to the blonde, much to the remaining leader's shock. Thank you. Naruto smiled. Nothing to thank me for. I just don't like stories with a sad ending. The Crimson Satan laughed relievedly before clasping his hand on the shinobi's shoulder. Well, if you ask me, you deserve all the thanks in the world. Let's go get ourselves a drink and have a good time. Yes, he proposed. Naruto grinned. I suppose it would be horrendously rude if I were to refuse. Count me in. Serzek grinned back. Laughter. Pure unadulterated laughter rang out through the air as an amused Serzek exited the bar with a similarly amused Naruto. Damn, now that my friend is a fine goal. Naruto nodded sagely. Only well-educated and well-cultured men can appreciate such a goal. Serzek wiped a tear away. So how many panties do you still have to collect until you reach your goal of 300? Well, Naruto adopted a thinking pose. So far I have 1 belonging to your sister. 1 that belongs to her queen, 30 from Yasaka, and 20 from Vena-chan. I believe that leaves me with 248 left. But from here on out the maximum number of underwear I can take from a specific woman is 5, that way I can really amass quite the collection. The Crimson Satan hummed approvingly. Anyway, I can help with that. Naruto shook his head. Unfortunately no, but I'm not disappointed. I'm already happy as it is that you're willing to support my goal of achieving world peace. And even if you could help, I'd rather you don't, to be honest. This ambition of mine is something I wish to accomplish on my own. Completely understandable. I myself would like to embark on a similar journey, but my wife Grafia would kill me if she catches me holding onto another woman's underwear. Serzek explained, internally shivering at the thought. There was no place in the underworld he could use to hide from his scary wife. Oh, Naruto turned excitedly towards the Satan Lucifer. Strange request, I know, but would it be alright with you if I took your wife's underwear? Serzek chuckled. Normally I'd skin someone alive for even making such a suggestion, but for you, my friend, it's no issue at all. Somewhere in the Lucifer estate. Grafia paused her cleaning, eyes narrowing dangerously as she felt the urge to absolutely murder her husband. Just do me a favor, Naruto-kun, don't piss her off too much.